vault that couldn't be broken, the Antwerp Diamond Heist. On the morning of February 17th, 2003, when the vault of Antwerp's Diamond Center was finally opened, security guards stood frozen in disbelief. Over $100 million in diamonds had vanished without a single alarm being triggered. They had just witnessed the aftermath of what would come to be known as the perfect crime, a heist that had defeated 10 layers of security, including infrared heat detectors, Doppler radar, magnetic fields, seismic sensors, and a lock with 100 million possible combinations. The architect of this seemingly impossible feat wasn't born into a criminal dynasty or trained by master thieves. He was Leonardo Notarbartolo, a middle-aged Italian who had spent 2 years meticulously planning while hiding in plain sight. Antwerp, Belgium, had been the center of the world's diamond trade for over 5 centuries. More than 80% of the world's rough diamonds and 50% of cut diamonds pass through this small district, with daily transactions worth millions. The Diamond Center stood at the heart of this district, a fortress-like building designed to protect the treasures within. The square around it was monitored by police cameras 24 hours a day. To enter the building after hours, one needed to pass through a key-carded private entrance and navigate a lobby with security cameras, tracking every movement. The vault itself lay 2 floors below street level, protected by a combination of technologies that would make most thieves turn away: a light sensor, a magnetic field, a seismic sensor, and a motion detector. The vault door featured a combination lock with 100 million possible combinations and was further secured by 3-inch thick steel doors. Even if someone managed to get through all that, each safe deposit box within was individually locked. The Diamond Center had never been successfully breached. Leonardo Notarbartolo didn't match anyone's idea of a master criminal. At 50 years old, the Turin-based jeweler had a respectable front as a diamond merchant. His appearance was unremarkable: graying hair, average build, and a professional demeanor that allowed him to blend perfectly into the diamond district. What no one knew was that Notarbartolo was affiliated with a group of Italian thieves known as the School of Turin, specialists in high-security thefts. In 2000, Notarbartolo did something extraordinary in its ordinariness. He rented office number 607 in the Diamond Center, establishing himself as a legitimate tenant. For nearly 2 years, he played the role of an ordinary diamond dealer, becoming a familiar, trusted face in the building. Guards greeted him by name. Other merchants invited him for coffee, all while he was secretly mapping every inch of the center's security system, noting guard rotations, identifying blind spots in the camera coverage, and studying the vault's design. Behind the scenes, Notarbartolo was assembling an elite team. Each member of the 5-person crew brought specialized skills essential to defeating the formidable security systems. Speedy was the electronics expert who could disable alarm systems in minutes. The King of Keys could pick any lock or create duplicate keys from impressions. The monster stood over 6 feet tall with strength needed for the heavy physical aspects of the job. Genius, as his nickname suggested, was the team's technical mastermind who could understand and defeat any security system. Together, they spent months in a rented warehouse in Turin, building a replica of the Diamond Center's vault and rehearsing their movements down to the second. They practiced bypassing each security measure, timing their workflow, and preparing for every contingency. Nothing was left to chance. The planning phase was a masterpiece of patience and attention to detail. Using his privileged access, Notarbartolo videotaped the interior of the vault using a camera hidden in a ballpoint pen. He collected discarded bits of paper from the trash that contained vault entry procedures. He observed which security personnel were diligent and which were complacent. The team created specialized tools designed specifically for this vault, including a device to defeat the magnetic sensors and custom-made aluminum plates to block the light sensors without triggering the alarm. They even obtained the schematics for the Mass-Hamilton combination lock used on the vault door. Supposedly available only to certified security professionals, the timing was another calculated element. Valentine's Day weekend of 2003. The vault would be full of diamonds ready for the holiday market, yet the building would be largely empty for the weekend. The night of February 15th, 2003 marked the culmination of their meticulous planning. The team entered the building through the underground parking garage, using duplicate keys Notarbartolo had prepared. They moved with practiced precision through the building service areas, avoiding the main lobbies where cameras would capture their presence. When they reached the vault antechamber, they faced their first major challenge: a row of infrared heat detectors. Using a custom-made polyester shield sprayed with black thermal paint, they created a tunnel that blocked the sensors from detecting their body heat. Next came the magnetic field sensor, defeated by carefully positioning aluminum plates to maintain the field, while creating a gap large enough for them to slip through. The vault door presented the greatest challenge. The team applied a specially developed polymer compound to the door and used a custom-made vacuum device to manipulate the lock's tumblers. It was delicate work that required absolute precision. Any mistake would trigger the seismic sensor attached to the vault. After hours of careful manipulation, the impossible happened. The 3-ton door swung open without a single alarm being triggered. Inside, they methodically drilled and cut open safe deposit boxes, focusing on those known to contain the highest value stones. They worked through the night, carefully collecting diamonds, cash, jewelry, and bearer bonds, and placing them in duffel bags. By dawn, they had emptied 123 of the 160 deposit boxes. As silently as they had entered, they disappeared into the early morning darkness of Antwerp. The discovery of the heist the following Monday morning sent shockwaves through the Diamond District and beyond. The vault that couldn't be broken had been comprehensively defeated. Initial estimates placed the value of stolen goods at $100 million, though later assessments suggested it might have been closer to $400 million. Insurance companies dispatched investigators, while the Belgian police and Interpol launched one of the largest investigations in European history. The level of sophistication stunned even veteran security experts. How had the thieves defeated so many redundant systems? How had they obtained the vault combination? Had there been inside help? The questions multiplied as the investigation progressed. The first break came from an unexpected source. A farmer on the outskirts of Antwerp reported finding discarded papers and trash on his property. Among the items were bags and packaging materials with the Diamond Center's address, along with half-eaten salami sandwiches and other refuse. The careless disposal of this evidence would prove to be the thieves' undoing. Forensic teams descended on the site and collected DNA evidence and fingerprints. Meanwhile, investigators reviewing security footage from the area around the Diamond Center noticed a car with Italian license plates making repeated passes during the weekend of the heist. The car was traced to Leonardo Notarbartolo. On February 21st, just days after the heist, Belgian police arrested Notarbartolo at his apartment in Turin. Inside, they found diamonds worth about $300,000 hidden in a secret compartment behind his kitchen cabinets. A substantial sum, but only a fraction of what had been stolen. At first, Notar Bartolo denied any involvement, but the evidence was mounting. His DNA matched samples from the discarded trash, and keys to the diamond center were found in his possession. Eventually, he admitted his role, though he insisted that the heist's true target was not diamonds, but rather evidence of diamond industry fraud hidden in the vault. Most investigators dismissed this as an attempt to distract from the straightforward motive of enormous profit. One by one, authorities identified and arrested other members of the team. The King of Keys was captured in France, while Speedy was arrested in Italy. However, the vast majority of the stolen diamonds and other valuables were never recovered. The thieves had already dispersed their haul through the labyrinthine networks of the international diamond black market, where stones could be recut, recertified, and resold without raising suspicion. Notar Bartolo was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was released in 2009 after serving just over half his sentence. The full truth of how they defeated each security measure has never been completely revealed. The investigation uncovered several ingenious techniques employed by the thieves. They had sprayed women's hairspray on the lenses of motion-detecting cameras, gradually building up layer after layer over several visits. When the heist occurred, the hardened layers prevented the cameras from detecting movement, while still displaying what appeared to be normal images to security monitors. They had obtained the vault's combination possibly by using a tiny camera hidden above the keypad to record staff entering the code. Most impressively, they had defeated the heat sensors in the vault antechamber by completely insulating themselves within specially designed suits that prevented their body heat from being detected. Yet mysteries remain. Some security experts remain convinced that the heist could not have been executed without inside help. Certain security footage from the night of the robbery mysteriously disappeared. The vault's light detector should have been impossible to defeat in the way the thieves claimed, leading to theories about undisclosed vulnerabilities in the system. The most persistent question involves the vault's combination lock. Even knowing the combination, the lock required a special key possessed only by the vault manager. How the thieves acquired or duplicated this key remains unclear. Some speculate that they used sophisticated electronics to map the lock's internal mechanism and fabricate a matching key, though such technology would have been at the very cutting edge of lock-defeating capabilities. The Antwerp diamond heist fundamentally changed security practices in the diamond industry. Vault designs were reconsidered, with many facilities implementing randomized mechanical and digital locks that required multiple authorized personnel to be present simultaneously for access. Biometric authentication became standard. Safe deposit box designs were reinforced against drilling. Insurance companies demanded more frequent security audits and surprise inspections. The Diamond Center itself underwent a complete security overhaul, though many merchants had already moved their valuables to facilities they considered more secure. Beyond its practical impact, the heist captured the public imagination in a way few crimes have. It represented the perfect blend of audacity, technical sophistication, and scale that makes for an irresistible story. Books were written, documentaries produced, and Hollywood screenwriters began developing fictional accounts inspired by the heist. There was something almost admirable about the patience, intelligence, and precision with which it had been executed. A criminal act elevated to something approaching artistry. For aspiring security professionals, it became a cautionary tale and a case study in how multiple overlapping systems could still be defeated by sufficiently determined and clever adversaries. Leonardo Notar Bartolo has maintained an air of mystery about certain aspects of the heist. In interviews given after his release from prison, He has alternated between coy hints and outright misdirection. When asked where the remaining diamonds are, he simply smiles. When questioned about techniques the police never discovered, he suggests there were many. Whether this is genuine or simply the practiced mystique of a man who enjoys his notorious reputation remains unknown. What is clear is that he orchestrated what many still consider to be the most sophisticated theft in history. 2 decades later, the Antwerp diamond heist stands as a testament to the limitations of any security system when faced with sufficient determination, intelligence, and time for planning. It represents both a spectacular success from the criminal's perspective and a catastrophic failure from the security industry's viewpoint. Perhaps most intriguingly, it demonstrates that in an age of digital security and surveillance, old-fashioned human ingenuity, both criminal and protective, remains the most critical factor in the eternal contest between those who safeguard valuables and those who seek to steal them. The diamonds, like perfect crystallized enigmas, remain scattered across the world, their brilliant facets catching light in distant cities, their origins obscured by time and transformation. The perfect heist, it seems, leaves perfect mysteries in its wake. The night art vanished, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft. In the early hours of March 18, 1990, as the city of Boston slept under a moonless sky, 2 men in police uniforms approached the side entrance of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Their breath formed clouds in the cold March air as they pressed the buzzer and announced themselves as police officers responding to a disturbance. Inside, a young security guard glanced at the surveillance monitor. The uniforms looked authentic enough, Boston Police Department patches clearly visible, hats with the appropriate insignia, dark blue uniforms with silver badges catching the faint light. It was 1:24 a.m., and nothing about this seemed particularly alarming, despite the unusual hour. After all, police occasionally patrolled the perimeter of the museum. The guard buzzed them in, unwittingly setting in motion what would become the largest art theft in history and one of the most enduring mysteries in the world of crime. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was not just any museum. It was the passion project and legacy of Boston socialite Isabella Stewart Gardner, who had spent decades collecting masterpieces from across the globe. Housed in a Venetian-style palazzo in Boston's Fenway neighborhood, the museum contained over 2,500 objects, paintings, sculptures, furniture, manuscripts, rare books, and decorative arts. Gardner had been explicit in her will. The collection was to remain exactly as she had arranged it. Not a single frame was to be moved, not a single painting rehung. The museum stood as a time capsule of her exquisite taste, preserved exactly as it had been at her death in 1924. This strict provision would later add poignancy to the crime, as empty frames hanging on the walls would serve as haunting reminders of what had been taken. The 2 uniformed men who entered the museum that night quickly revealed their true intentions. "This is a robbery," one announced, instructing the guard to summon his colleague from another part of the museum. When both guards were present, the thieves asked their names and ordered them to stand against a wall. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery," one thief reiterated. "Don't give us any problems and you won't get hurt." The guards were handcuffed, their eyes and mouths covered with duct tape, and their hands and feet secured with handcuffs and electrical tape. The thieves then led them to separate areas of the basement, where they were handcuffed to pipes and railings. With the guards secured and no one else in the building, the thieves had the entire museum to themselves. What happened next has puzzled investigators, art experts, and crime analysts for over 3 decades. Rather than hastily grabbing whatever looked valuable, the thieves moved methodically through the museum, selecting specific works while ignoring others of equal or greater value. Their first target was the Dutch room on the 2nd floor, where they removed Rembrandt's only known seascape, the storm on the Sea of Galilee, cutting it from its frame. They did the same with Rembrandt's A Lady and Gentleman in Black, and a small self-portrait etching by the Dutch master. They then turned their attention to Johannes Vermeer's The Concert, one of only 36 known paintings by the artist in the world. Also taken from the room were a Chinese bronze beaker from the Shang dynasty and 5 drawings by Edgar Degas. Moving to the short gallery, they removed Chez Tortoni, a painting by Edouard Manet, and then proceeded to the Blue Room, where they attempted to remove a Napoleonic banner, but abandoned it on the floor. In total, they took 13 works with an estimated value exceeding $500 million. The works ranged in size from small etchings to Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, which measured about 5 feet by 4 feet. Their selections showed an understanding of art history, yet also included puzzling choices and omissions. They left behind Titian's The Rape of Europa, considered by many to be the most valuable piece in the collection. They ignored works by Raphael, Botticelli, and other masters that could have fetched enormous sums. The inexplicable pattern of theft has led some to speculate that the thieves were working from a specific shopping list provided by a collector or collectors who desired these particular works. The thieves spent a total of 81 minutes inside the museum. Before leaving, they visited the security office and took the videotapes from the recording equipment. However, they missed the data recorded to a hard drive backup, which later confirmed their entrance time and movements, but critically failed to capture clear images of their faces. As they departed, they told the guards, "You'll be hearing from us in about a year." It was 2:45 a.m. when they left the museum, disappearing into the night with $500 million worth of irreplaceable art. The guards remained bound until police arrived at 8:15 a.m., alerted by the day shift, who had been unable to enter the museum. The investigation began immediately, with the FBI taking the lead due to the scope and value of the theft. The initial search for evidence yielded frustratingly little. The thieves had left minimal forensic evidence, a few fingerprints and some duct tape residue. They had been careful to avoid most of the motion detectors in the museum, suggesting prior knowledge of the security system. The security guard who had admitted them described them as white men in their 30s, one with a mustache, both of average height and build, wearing authentic-looking police uniforms, but without clear photographs or more distinctive descriptions. This was of limited use. The guard's decision to admit the men violated museum protocol, which specified that police should never be admitted without first calling the station to verify their identity. But on the night of the heist, with only 2 young and relatively inexperienced guards on duty, this protocol had been overlooked. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the investigation seemed to stall. The thieves' promise to contact the museum within a year proved false. No ransom demand ever materialized. The FBI pursued hundreds of leads, interviewing art dealers, gallery owners, known art thieves, and anyone who might have information about the stolen masterpieces. They explored potential connections to organized crime, particularly the Italian-American mafia in Boston and Providence, Rhode Island. They investigated the possibility of an inside job, scrutinizing current and former museum employees. They chased rumors that the art had been taken overseas, to Ireland as leverage for the Irish Republican Army, to Saudi Arabia for a billionaire's private collection, to Japan, where wealthy collectors might pay for exclusive viewing rights. None of these avenues led to the recovery of a single piece. The Gardner theft occurred at a time when museum security was not what it is today. The museum system was relatively basic: some motion detectors, magnetic contact alarms on the windows, and a rudimentary CCTV system, all monitored by 2 guards with minimal training. There was no direct connection to the police station, no sophisticated perimeter detection, and no individual alarms on the artworks themselves. In the wake of the theft, museums worldwide reassessed their security protocols, implementing more comprehensive systems. For the Gardner Museum itself, the changes came too late. The empty frames, left hanging on the walls in accordance with Isabella Stewart Gardner's will that nothing be moved, became somber reminders of the museum's greatest loss. Over the years, several promising leads emerged only to dissolve upon closer scrutiny. In 1994, anonymous letters demanded $2.6 million for the return of the paintings, but investigations revealed these to be hoaxes. In 1997, a Boston art dealer received a phone call saying the Vermeer could be returned for $10 million, but again, this led nowhere. In 2002, a promising lead pointed to Brooklyn, New York, where it was believed the art might be stored in the false ceiling of an apartment linked to a Boston mobster. FBI agents spent days searching the building but found nothing. In 2010, the FBI notified the Gardner Museum that someone had attempted to sell the stolen art in Philadelphia, but the trail went cold without recovering any pieces. The most tantalizing and persistent theory involves Boston's organized crime networks. The FBI has focused particularly on a criminal network operated by Carmelo Merlino, who ran an auto repair shop in Dorchester, Massachusetts, that served as a front for illegal activities. According to FBI informants, Merlino had associates who claimed knowledge of the Gardner theft. One of these associates, Robert Guarente, allegedly possessed at least some of the stolen art before his death in 2004. In 2010, his widow told the FBI that her husband had given at least 2 of the stolen paintings to Robert Gentile, a Connecticut mobster with ties to the Philadelphia organized crime family. When the FBI raided Gentile's home in 2012, they found a handwritten list of the stolen paintings with estimated values, suggesting he had at least knowledge of their whereabouts, though he denied any involvement until his death in 2021. The investigation has been complicated by the deaths of key suspects and potential witnesses. As time passes, those who might have first-hand knowledge of the crime have either died or become increasingly unwilling to speak. Bobby Donati, a Boston criminal who some believe was involved in planning the heist, was killed in 1991 in what appeared to be a mob hit unrelated to the Gardner theft. David Turner, another suspected participant, was sentenced to 38 years in prison on separate charges in 1999. Miles Connor, a notorious art thief who claimed he could help recover the paintings, though he was in prison at the time of the heist, died in 2020 without providing information that led to recovery. Each death further diminishes the possibility of resolving the case through direct testimony. In 2013, the FBI announced a significant breakthrough, stating they were confident they had identified the thieves, 2 men who were now deceased. They believed the art had moved through organized crime circles from Boston to Philadelphia, and then to Connecticut. However, they still could not locate the artworks themselves. The reward for information leading to the recovery of the art has increased over the years, reaching $10 million in 2017. the largest private reward ever offered for stolen property. The museum and the FBI have emphasized that their focus is solely on recovering the art, not on prosecuting those who might currently possess it, in hopes this might encourage someone to come forward. The theft has generated its own mythology and cultural significance over the decades. Books have been written about it, documentaries produced, podcasts recorded. It has inspired courses in art security and museum studies. The empty frames, still hanging on the walls of the Gardner Museum, have become powerful symbols of absence and loss in the art world. They also represent an enduring hope that someday the original works might return to fill those frames again. The museum's director has repeatedly stated that the staff maintains the facility as if the stolen works might return at any moment, preserving their places in the collection. Art theft experts have pointed out that stealing famous artworks rarely results in financial gain for the thieves. Such recognizable pieces cannot be sold on the legitimate market, and even black market transactions are extremely risky since potential buyers know the works are stolen and highly sought by authorities. Some experts speculate that the Gardner art might have been stolen for use as collateral in drug deals or as get-out-of-jail bargaining chips to be traded for reduced sentences if the thieves were ever caught for other crimes. Others suggest the pieces might have been stolen on commission for a private collector, someone who desired the works for personal viewing with no intention of ever displaying them publicly. The theory of a commission theft gained traction when analysis of the thieves' selections revealed their curious pattern. They took valuable but less famous works by Rembrandt, while leaving more recognizable pieces. They ignored works by Raphael and Botticelli that would have been easily transportable. They spent time removing the Napoleonic flag finial, a relatively minor piece, then abandoned it on the floor. These actions suggest they might have been working from a specific list rather than making value judgments during the heist. Additionally, their careful cutting of the paintings from frames, while damaging, showed they weren't completely reckless. They knew enough to avoid rolling the canvases, which would have caused more severe damage. What makes the Gardner theft particularly painful for art historians and appreciators is the unique and irreplaceable nature of what was taken. Vermeer's The Concert represents 1/36th of the artist's total known work. Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee was his only known seascape. The Degas sketches provided valuable insights into his working process. These are not merely valuable commodities. They are cultural treasures that form part of humanity's artistic heritage. Their absence creates a gap in our understanding of these masters' development and artistic vision. While their monetary value is extraordinary, their cultural and historical value is incalculable. As the years pass, the probability of recovering the artwork intact becomes increasingly uncertain. Paintings, particularly those from the 17th century, require careful conservation. Improper storage in attics, basements, or other environments with uncontrolled temperature and humidity can cause severe and sometimes irreparable damage. Experts worry that even if the works are eventually found, they may have deteriorated beyond restoration. This concern adds urgency to the ongoing search. Every year that passes potentially diminishes the condition of these masterpieces, assuming they still exist in their original form. The statute of limitations for the theft itself has expired, meaning the thieves cannot be prosecuted for the original crime. However, charges of conspiracy, possession of stolen property, and transportation of stolen property across state lines could still apply, depending on the circumstances, The FBI and the museum have repeatedly stated that their primary interest is in recovering the art, not in prosecution. They have offered immunity deals and confidentiality to anyone who can facilitate the return of the works. Despite these assurances, no one has come forward with credible information leading to recovery. Isabella Stewart Gardner's passion for art extended beyond mere collection. She believed in creating a space where people could experience beauty and find inspiration. The museum she created was more than a display of wealth. It was an educational institution and a gift to the city of Boston. The theft violated not just the security of a building, but the spirit of that gift. The empty frames that hang in the museum today serve as poignant reminders of what has been lost and what might still be recovered. They represent both absence and hope, the absence of masterpieces from public view, and the hope that they might someday return. As dawn broke over Boston on March 18, 1990, few could have imagined that the night's events would remain unresolved for decades. The two men who walked out of the Gardner Museum with 13 priceless artworks disappeared into history, leaving behind one of the art world's greatest unsolved mysteries. The Sky Bandits, the Vastberga helicopter robbery. As dawn broke over Stockholm on September 23, 2009, residents of the Vastberga district were startled awake by the distinctive rhythmic thump of helicopter blades cutting through the early morning air. In a city where helicopter traffic was strictly regulated, particularly at such an early hour, the sound was unusual enough to draw attention. Some sleepy-eyed onlookers peered through their windows to witness an extraordinary sight. A Dark Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter hovering just above the roof of the G4S Cash Depot, a fortress-like building designed to house millions in currency. What these accidental witnesses were observing wasn't a military exercise or emergency operation, but rather the beginning of what would become known as one of the most audacious and cinematically perfect heists in European history, a crime so precisely orchestrated that it seemed to belong more in a Hollywood screenplay than in the typically peaceful Swedish capital. Sweden had long prided itself on being a low-crime society, where robberies of this magnitude were virtually unheard of. The G4S Cash Depot in Vastberga was a testament to this confidence. A modern building with state-of-the-art security systems, reinforced walls, and protocols designed to make it impenetrable to conventional robbery attempts. The facility served as a central hub for cash distribution throughout Stockholm, temporarily storing enormous sums of money before it was transported to banks, ATMs, and businesses across the region. On this particular September morning, the depot contained millions in Swedish kroner, approximately 39 million, equivalent to about $5 million USD dollars. Cash that was about to be relocated in the most unexpected way possible. Inside the helicopter, 3 men dressed entirely in black prepared for a descent that would have challenged even military-trained pilots. The aircraft hovered precariously close to the depot's roof, its rotors barely clearing the building's edges. The pilot, displaying remarkable skill, maintained a stable position just long enough for his accomplices to exit onto the roof, carrying bags of specialized equipment including glass cutters, rope ladders, and powerful automatic weapons. The men moved with choreographed precision toward a skylight that would provide their entry point. The fact that they chose this particular access route was no coincidence. It was one of the few points not covered by the building's extensive motion sensors and alarms. This knowledge alone suggested months of intelligence gathering and insider information. Meanwhile, across Stockholm, police were facing an unprecedented challenge that would prevent them from responding to the unfolding robbery. Shortly before the helicopter appeared at the cash depot, emergency services had received reports of a suspicious package left at the police helicopter base in Mittinga. The package, marked with the word bomb, had been placed strategically at the entrance to the hangar, housing the only police helicopters in the region. Although it would later prove to be a fake explosive device, the threat was convincing enough to lock down the entire facility. No police helicopter would be taking off to intercept the thieves. In a separate but coordinated action, caltrops, metal spikes designed to puncture vehicle tires, had been scattered across the roads leading to the depot, effectively blocking any immediate ground response. The thieves had systematically eliminated the two fastest response options available to law enforcement. Back at the G4S depot, workers inside had no indication of what was transpiring on the roof above them. The night shift was winding down, with staff performing routine end-of-shift tasks at approximately 5:15 a.m. Their mundane morning was shattered by the sound of breaking glass as the skylight above exploded inward. Down through the opening rappelled the men from the helicopter, landing directly in the cash handling area. Armed with AK-47 assault rifles, they immediately ordered the staff to lie face down on the floor. No one resisted. The weapons and the shocking nature of the entry left them compliant and stunned. One worker would later describe the surreal quality of the moment. It was like watching an impossible scene from a movie happening in real life. They came from the ceiling like commandos. The robbers' knowledge of the facility's layout was immediately apparent. Rather than searching randomly, they moved directly to specific areas where cash was stored. They knew precisely which doors to breach, which safes to target, and most importantly, how much time they had before any effective police response could be mounted. Using a portable circular saw, they cut through the barriers separating them from the cash storage room. The noise was deafening in the concrete structure, adding to the psychological impact on the terrified staff. One robber remained with the employees, ensuring they stayed compliant, while the others focused on loading the money into large duffel bags. They worked with methodical efficiency, communicating through hand signals and short commands, minimizing unnecessary conversation that might later provide voice identification. On the roof, the helicopter pilot maintained his position, the craft's rotors still spinning, a clear indication that this was not intended to be a lengthy operation. The thieves had planned for a specific time window, understanding that even with the police helicopter immobilized and road access compromised, a response would eventually materialize. Every minute was calculated, each action choreographed to maximize efficiency within their predetermined time frame. After just 20 minutes inside the building, the robbers signaled they were ready for extraction. They began moving the heavy bags of cash to the roof, where ropes allowed them to hoist their illicit cargo into the waiting helicopter. The staff, still lying face down on the floor, heard the robbers' footsteps fading as they ascended back through the skylight. The sound of the helicopter's engine increasing in pitch signaled the criminals' departure. By 5:40 a.m., less than 30 minutes after they had first landed, the Bell 206 was lifting away from the depot, banking sharply to the south before disappearing into the early morning sky. Inside the building, shaken employees finally dared to move, triggering alarms and making panicked calls to both their superiors and the police. But by then, the helicopter was already far from the scene, following a carefully planned escape route that would take advantage of Stockholm's archipelago geography, a complex maze of islands and waterways that would make tracking extremely difficult. The police response, when it finally came, was hampered by confusion and the carefully laid obstacles. The fake bomb at the helicopter base had to be cleared by the bomb squad before any aerial pursuit could be launched. The caltrops on the roads forced police vehicles to find alternative routes, losing precious minutes. By the time a coordinated response was underway, the thieves' helicopter had vanished from radar, having descended to an altitude that allowed it to fly beneath radar coverage. The robbers had exploited a perfect storm of vulnerabilities in the response system, creating a window of opportunity that they had exploited with military precision. The abandoned helicopter was discovered approximately 40 minutes later at a remote location in Arninge, about 25 kilometers north of the cash depot. The choice of landing site was strategic, close enough to Stockholm for a quick escape but far enough to evade immediate pursuit. The area was wooded and secluded, providing cover as the thieves transferred to ground vehicles that were undoubtedly waiting nearby. By the time police located the helicopter, the perpetrators were long gone, having melted into the morning commuter traffic of Greater Stockholm. Forensic teams descended on the aircraft, but the thieves had been careful. They had worn gloves throughout the operation and had wiped down surfaces before departing. The helicopter itself provided the first solid lead. It had been stolen the night before from a hangar at Rörby airfield, west of Stockholm, as news of the heist spread throughout Sweden and then internationally. The audacity of the crime captured global attention. Security camera footage, eventually released to the public, showed the remarkable sight of the helicopter hovering over the building and the dark-clad figures rappelling onto the roof. The media quickly dubbed it the helicopter robbery, though some Swedish newspapers referred to it as the military-style heist due to the tactical precision involved. Law enforcement officials privately admitted their begrudging admiration for the technical execution, even as they mobilized one of the largest manhunts in Swedish history to capture the perpetrators. The investigation quickly focused on members of the Stockholm criminal underworld, particularly those with connections to helicopter pilots or military training. The level of planning suggested a team with specialized skills, not just in flying and rappelling, but in understanding security systems, police response protocols, and the internal operations of the cash depot. Investigators became convinced that someone with inside knowledge of G4S procedures had been involved in the planning, if not the execution. Employee backgrounds were scrutinized, with particular attention paid to anyone who had recently left the company or had access to sensitive information about cash storage and security systems. A breakthrough came just days after the robbery, when police, acting on an anonymous tip, raided an apartment in a southern Stockholm suburb. There they discovered equipment believed to have been used in the heist: specialized rope consistent with what had been left at the scene, clothing similar to that worn by the perpetrators, and most damning, a small amount of cash with serial numbers matching the stolen money. This led to the first arrests: 2 men with extensive criminal records and connections to organized motorcycle gangs. One had previous convictions for armed robbery, while the other had served in the military, potentially explaining the tactical precision of the operation. As the investigation progressed, the web widened. A helicopter instructor was taken into custody on suspicion of having trained the pilot. 3 more suspects were arrested after phone records showed communications consistent with planning the robbery. 1 suspect was apprehended trying to cross into Norway with a substantial amount of cash. By October 2009, police had 7 men in custody, all with connections to Stockholm's organized crime networks. The investigation revealed that the planning for the heist had begun nearly 2 years earlier, with the team conducting extensive surveillance of the depot, studying police response times, and rehearsing each phase of the operation repeatedly. The helicopter itself provided another investigative thread. The Bell 206 had been carefully selected for its combination of speed, maneuverability, and load capacity. Investigators discovered that multiple helicopters of this model had been examined by individuals connected to the suspects in the months leading up to the robbery, suggesting they had been searching for the optimal aircraft for their purposes. The pilot's skill in hovering precisely over the building pointed to professional training, narrowing the field of potential suspects to those with either military or commercial helicopter experience. Swedish authorities worked with Interpol to trace helicopter pilots with criminal connections who might have been recruited for the job. Court proceedings began in August 2010, nearly a year after the heist. The trial revealed additional details about the remarkable planning that had gone into the operation. The prosecution presented evidence that the team had conducted dry runs of the robbery, timing each phase down to the second. They had studied the shift changes at the depot to determine the optimal time for entry, when staffing would be minimal. They had analyzed the structural blueprints of the building to identify the skylight as the ideal entry point. Maps found in one suspect's home showed marked police stations with response time calculations. The level of detail was extraordinary, comparable to a military operation rather than a typical criminal enterprise. The defense strategy focused primarily on challenging the physical evidence, linking the suspects to the scene. Their attorneys argued that the circumstantial nature of much of the evidence, phone records, associations, and background, was insufficient to prove direct involvement. They particularly contested the forensic evidence from the helicopter and the apartment raid, suggesting that the police had rushed to judgment in their eagerness to solve a high-profile case. The absence of DNA evidence directly linking the suspects to the helicopter or the depot became a central point of contention. After a trial lasting several months, the court delivered its verdict in October 2010. 5 men were convicted of various charges related to the robbery, receiving sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years. The pilot was among those convicted, identified through technical evidence and testimony from former associates. However, several suspects were acquitted due to insufficient evidence, a reflection of how carefully the crime had been planned to minimize forensic traces. Of the approximately 39 million kroner stolen, only about 100,000 had been recovered. The vast majority of the money had disappeared, likely laundered through a network of front businesses, or transferred abroad. The sentences were considered relatively light by international standards, particularly given the violence threatened, though not ultimately used, during the robbery. This reflected Sweden's rehabilitation-focused criminal justice system, which emphasizes shorter sentences combined with intensive rehabilitation programs. Some international observers expressed surprise at the leniency, but Swedish legal experts noted that the sentences were consistent with national guidelines for armed robbery without physical injury to victims. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Vastberga helicopter robbery was its influence on security protocols throughout Scandinavia and beyond. Cash depots across Europe reassessed their vulnerability to aerial assault, an attack vector that had previously been considered so unlikely that few facilities had meaningful countermeasures in place. G4S and similar companies installed anti-helicopter landing devices on their roofs, ranging from simple physical barriers to more sophisticated detection systems. Police forces in major European cities reviewed their response capabilities for aerial crimes, with many adding contingency plans specifically addressing helicopter-based robberies. The Swedish police faced particular scrutiny for the vulnerability exposed by the fake bomb at their helicopter base. The fact that a single threat could immobilize the entire aerial response capability represented a single point of failure that criminals had exploited with devastating effectiveness. In the years following the heist, police reorganized their aerial assets, distributing helicopters across multiple locations and implementing more robust threat assessment protocols that would prevent a similar shutdown of resources. Additionally, rapid response teams were equipped with portable tire spike countermeasures to prevent the road-blocking tactics that had delayed ground response. Beyond the practical security changes, the Vastberga robbery achieved something rarely seen in criminal history, a certain reluctant admiration even from those tasked with preventing such crimes. The technical execution, the meticulous planning, and the cinematic quality of the heist elevated it above typical robberies. Security consultants worldwide used it as a case study in comprehensive planning and exploiting systemic vulnerabilities. Law enforcement agencies analyzed it for insights into how modern criminal organizations adopt military-style precision and tactics. The robbery became a reference point in discussions of high-level security breaches, mentioned alongside legendary heists like the Antwerp diamond theft and the Baker Street robbery. The cultural impact extended beyond professional circles. The robbery inspired several documentary films and was referenced in Swedish crime fiction. International media frequently cited it as an example of the perfect heist, focusing on the Hollywood-like qualities of the operation: the helicopter descent, the rooftop entry, the precisely timed execution, and the clean getaway. This romanticized portrayal obscured the serious criminal nature of the act, sometimes to the frustration of authorities, who emphasized that the robbery had involved threatening innocent workers with automatic weapons and had caused lasting psychological trauma to those present. For the G4S employees who experienced the robbery firsthand, the aftermath involved more than security protocols and cultural fascination. Many reported symptoms of post-traumatic stress, including nightmares, anxiety, and difficulty returning to work. The company provided counseling services, but several employees ultimately left their positions, unable to shake the memory of looking up to see armed men descending from the ceiling. One employee later told a documentary filmmaker, "The sound of helicopters still makes my heart race. I can be anywhere, shopping, at home, in the park, and if I hear those blades, I'm instantly back in that moment face down on the floor, wondering if I would survive." The most enduring mystery of the Vastberga helicopter robbery remains the fate of the stolen money. Despite the convictions, the bulk of the cash was never recovered. Financial investigators traced some suspicious transactions in the months following the heist, but the money trail eventually went cold. Theories abound. The cash may have been smuggled out of Sweden, possibly to Eastern Europe or South America, where it could be more easily integrated into legitimate businesses. It might have been used to finance other criminal enterprises, or divided among a larger network than the group that was ultimately prosecuted. Whatever its fate, the 39 million kroner joined the pantheon of legendary unrecovered criminal proceeds, alongside the loot from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft and the ransom from the D.B. Cooper hijacking. As years passed, the Vastberga helicopter robbery secured its place in criminal history as a robbery that embodied both the height of criminal ingenuity and the inevitable consequences of such bold lawbreaking. The convicted participants served their sentences and were eventually released back into Swedish society, their names permanently associated with the audacious crime. The helicopter itself recovered and returned to its rightful owner after forensic examination, was reportedly sold to a buyer in Norway, who was either unaware of or undeterred by its infamous history. The Diamond Wheezers, the Hatton Garden, safe deposit burglary. As London prepared to celebrate the Easter weekend of 2015, the streets of the city's historic jewelry quarter grew quiet. Shops closed early on Thursday, April 2nd, their owners and employees departing for the 4-day holiday weekend. Security guards made their final rounds, alarms were set, and the normally bustling Hatton Garden district fell into an unusual stillness. This diamond district, home to hundreds of jewelry businesses and the famous Hatton Garden safe deposit lilting Dowd, had stood as London's center of precious gems and metals since the medieval period. The timing, a rare 4-day weekend when the area would be largely deserted, was perfect for what would soon become one of the most audacious heists in British criminal history, executed not by young tech-savvy criminals, but by a crew of elderly men whose combined age exceeded 500 years. At approximately 9:19 p.m. on that Thursday evening, a group of men in fluorescent construction vests pulled up in a white van outside 88 to 90 Hatton Garden. To any casual observer, they appeared to be maintenance workers arriving for scheduled repairs, nothing unusual in London's busy commercial districts. With practiced efficiency, they unloaded tools and equipment, including several large bags and wheeled containers. Their unhurried manner and professional appearance provided perfect camouflage as they made their way into the building. With most neighboring businesses closed for the extended holiday and few pedestrians about, they attracted little attention. This unremarkable entry belied the extraordinary events that would unfold over the next 4 days. A burglary so brazen and meticulously planned that it would captivate the world's attention and earn the perpetrators the nickname the Diamond Wheezers. Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Lel Teddy occupied the basement of the building, housing some 996 safe deposit boxes where jewelers, collectors, and private individuals stored valuable jewelry, gems, precious metals, cash, and other valuables worth tens of millions of pounds. The vault itself was formidable, protected by a series of security measures including reinforced concrete walls, motion detectors, and a massive metal door designed to withstand determined attacks. The facility had been in operation since 1954 and had built its reputation on security and discretion. Many of its clients were from the jewelry trade, storing their most valuable inventory in what they believed to be impenetrable security. The men moved through the building with evident familiarity, suggesting extensive prior reconnaissance. Their target was not the main entrance to the safe deposit company, but rather the elevator shaft that provided access to the basement. They disabled the elevator at the ground floor, forcing open its doors and revealing the shaft that would become their pathway downward. One of the men, smaller and more agile than his elderly companions, climbed down the shaft to the basement level, where the vault was located. This initial phase demonstrated one of the most remarkable aspects of the heist: the physical capabilities of men whose ages ranged from 58 to 76 years, undertaking a physically demanding break-in that would challenge criminals half their age. What the burglars didn't realize was that their initial entry had triggered a silent alarm. At 12:21 a.m. on Friday, April 3rd, the security company responsible for monitoring the building contacted the Metropolitan Police to report the alarm activation. A police car was assigned to investigate, arriving at the scene at approximately 1 a.m. the officers conducted what would later be described as a cursory examination, noting that the building's exterior doors appeared secure. Without checking the interior or contacting the security company for further information, they departed, logging the incident as a false alarm. This catastrophic failure in police response gave the burglars the time they needed to execute their ambitious plan. Inside the basement, the men approached the massive vault. Rather than attempting to breach the main vault door, a formidable barrier designed specifically to prevent forced entry, they chose a more ingenious approach. Using a heavy-duty diamond-tipped drilling machine of the type used in construction, they began boring holes into the concrete wall adjacent to the vault door. The wall, while reinforced, offered less resistance than the door itself. The men worked in shifts, drilling numerous holes in a precise pattern that would allow them to create an opening, large enough for a person to crawl through. The drilling was physically demanding work, generating heat, dust, and considerable noise, all factors that would have made discovery likely on any normal business day, but which posed minimal risk during a 4-day holiday when the building would remain empty. The sophistication of the approach belied stereotypes about elderly criminals. These men brought decades of experience to bear on the challenge, demonstrating knowledge of building construction, security systems, and the specific vulnerabilities of the vault. As they drilled through the night, their patience and physical stamina were remarkable. At one point, the heavy-duty drill they were using broke down, a potentially catastrophic setback. Rather than abandoning the attempt, the men left the building, returning the following night, April 4th, with replacement equipment. This temporary withdrawal and return represented another calculated risk, one that paid off due to the extended holiday period. When they returned on the second night, the men resumed their methodical assault on the vault wall. After completing the pattern of holes, they used additional power tools to connect them, creating an opening approximately 2 feet square, just large enough for a person to squeeze through. The first man to enter the vault found himself in a treasure trove. Row upon row of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, each containing valuables whose precise nature and worth were known only to their owners. With no inventory requirements for safe deposit contents, many boxes likely contained undocumented wealth, making the potential value of the haul impossible to determine accurately. Over the next several hours, the thieves worked systematically through the vault, using crowbars, drills, and angle grinders to force open 73 of the 996 deposit boxes. Each box required individual attention, with the metal containers proving surprisingly resistant to their tools. The men selected boxes based on an apparently predetermined plan, suggesting inside knowledge about which ones might contain the most valuable items. As they opened each box, the contents were transferred to bags and wheeled containers they had brought specifically for this purpose. The haul included gold, platinum, diamonds, sapphires, cash, and jewelry, a glittering fortune that would eventually be valued at approximately £14 million, $20 million, though some estimates placed it much higher due to the likelihood of undeclared valuables. The physical demands of the heist were considerable. The men worked in the cramped, dusty confines of the vault for hours, breathing air contaminated with concrete dust and metal particles from their drilling and cutting. The oldest among them, Brian Reeder at 76, allegedly left after the first night, finding the physical demands too taxing. This detail, revealed later during their trial, added a tragicomic element to the narrative. An elderly burglar forced to retire mid-heist due to exhaustion, yet his younger accomplices persevered, working through the night to empty their selected boxes. As dawn approached on Easter Sunday, April 5th, the thieves completed their work. They gathered their tools and the bags containing their enormous haul and made their way back up through the building. They exited as they had entered, via the front door, loading their spoils into the white van that had delivered them. Their departure was as unremarkable as their arrival, with nothing to indicate to any passer-by that one of Britain's largest burglaries had just been concluded. The men drove away from Hatton Garden for the last time, leaving behind a scene that wouldn't be discovered until staff returned after the holiday weekend. On Tuesday, April 7th, employees of Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Lil Tadad arrived to open the facility after the long weekend. The scene that greeted them was shocking. The vault door itself remained secure, but the hole in the concrete wall revealed how the thieves had gained entry. Inside, the forced deposit boxes lay scattered and empty, their contents gone. The scale of the breach became apparent as box holders were contacted and began to arrive to assess their losses. Many faced financial ruin, as the contents of their boxes represented their most valuable inventory or personal wealth, often uninsured due to the presumed security of the facility. The Metropolitan Police immediately launched a major investigation, codenamed Operation Spire. The embarrassment of the missed alarm response added urgency to their efforts. Forensic teams descended on the scene, while detectives began the painstaking work of reviewing hundreds of hours of CCTV footage from cameras in the area. The footage yielded the first significant breakthrough: clear images of the white van and several of the perpetrators, whose faces were partially visible, despite attempts to conceal their identities. These images were released to the public, generating numerous tips. What the investigation revealed next astonished both the police and the public. The master criminals behind one of Britain's most ambitious burglaries were not youthful professionals, but elderly men with an average age of nearly 67. The press quickly dubbed them the Diamond Wheezers and the Bad Grandpas, in headlines that captured both the audacity of the crime and the surprising demographics of its perpetrators. Leading the group was 76-year-old Brian Reeder, a career criminal with convictions dating back to the 1960s. The other members of the gang, Daniel Jones, 58, Terry Perkins, 67, John Collins, 74, Carl Wood, 58, and William Lincoln, 60, had similar backgrounds in London's criminal underworld. The investigation revealed that the men had meticulously planned the heist over the preceding 3 years, conducting extensive reconnaissance of the building and its security systems. They had chosen the Easter weekend deliberately, understanding that the 4-day holiday provided the extended period they would need to complete their drilling operation. They had sourced specialized equipment, including the powerful Hilti D350 diamond-tip drill used to bore through the concrete wall. Perhaps most remarkably, they had managed to keep their planning secret despite their advanced ages and long-standing connections to London's criminal networks. On May 19th, 2015, just 6 weeks after the burglary, police conducted coordinated raids across London, arresting the core members of the gang. The evidence against them was overwhelming. In the homes of the suspects, police discovered burglary tools, clothes matching those seen on CCTV, and some of the stolen items. Most damning was the discovery of a copy of the book Forensics for Dummies in one suspect's home, an ironic attempt by these old-school criminals to understand modern detection techniques. Despite their awareness of forensic science, they had left numerous fingerprints and DNA traces at the scene. The arrests revealed additional details about the crew that captivated the public imagination. Several of the men suffered from age-related health conditions. One was recovering from a stroke, another had diabetes, and a third needed medication for a heart condition. During the heist itself, one had been forced to take bathroom breaks at a nearby pub due to prostate problems. These humanizing details transformed the narrative from one of master criminals to that of aging men attempting one last spectacular score before retirement, a real-life version of film tropes about elderly criminals attempting one final job. The investigation also uncovered the meticulous planning that had gone into the heist. The gang had obtained detailed information about the building's layout, the vault's construction, and the security systems in place. They had planned their entry and exit routes, chosen their tools based on specific knowledge of the vault's vulnerabilities, and timed their operation to coincide perfectly with the extended holiday. In many ways, the Hatton Garden burglary represented the culmination of decades of criminal experience, a masterclass in old-school burglary techniques applied to a modern target. As the case proceeded to trial, the public's fascination with the elderly gang grew. Court appearances showed frail-looking men with hearing aids and mobility issues, a stark contrast to the physical demands of the crime they had committed. The prosecution presented a compelling case, drawing on extensive physical evidence, CCTV footage, and telephone communications between the conspirators. Several of the men, recognizing the strength of the evidence against them, pleaded guilty. Others maintained their innocence, but were convicted by the jury. In March 2016, 7 men were sentenced to terms ranging from 6 to 7 years in prison for their roles in the burglary. The sentencing marked a poignant end to the criminal careers of men who had spent decades navigating London's underworld. For most, given their advanced ages, these sentences represented the likelihood of spending their final years behind bars. The judge, while acknowledging the sophisticated planning and execution of the crime, showed little sympathy for men who had chosen to crown their criminal careers with such an ambitious enterprise. The sentences reflected both the value of what was stolen and the audacity of targeting one of London's most secure facilities. One mystery that persisted even after the convictions was the full extent of what had been stolen and where much of it had gone. While police recovered approximately 1/3 of the stolen items during their searches of the suspects' properties, the majority of the haul remained missing. This suggested the involvement of additional co-conspirators, possibly including a mysterious figure referred to as Basil, who was seen on CCTV, but remained unidentified and at large for years after the main arrests. Speculation abounded that the gang had already passed much of the stolen jewelry and gems to handlers who had quickly moved them through London's grey market in precious stones or exported them to international markets, where their origins would be harder to trace. The Hatton Garden heist generated enormous media attention, with its blend of audacious crime and unlikely perpetrators proving irresistible to the public imagination. Books were written about the burglary, documentaries produced, and multiple feature films were put into development. The stories seemed to touch a cultural nerve, perhaps reflecting a certain nostalgia for traditional criminals from a bygone era, operating with drills and crowbars, rather than cyber attacks and digital infiltration. The age of the perpetrators added an element of dark comedy to the tale, with many commentators noting the physical challenges the elderly gang must have overcome to execute such a physically demanding crime. For the security industry, the Hatton Garden burglary prompted serious reassessment of vulnerability to what might be termed low-tech, high-concept attacks. The thieves had bypassed sophisticated alarm systems, not through technical hacking, but through the simple expedient of physical intrusion via an unexpected route. Their success highlighted the continuing vulnerability of even modern security systems to determined attackers with sufficient time and the right tools. Safe deposit facilities across London and beyond reviewed their security arrangements, particularly their structural vulnerabilities and response protocols for alarm activations. For the Metropolitan Police, the case represented both a success and an embarrassment. While the investigation had quickly identified and apprehended the perpetrators, the initial failure to properly respond to the alarm activation had given the thieves the time they needed to complete their crime. An internal review led to changes in alarm response protocols, particularly for commercial premises during holiday periods, when traditional burglaries are more likely. The case also prompted discussion about the allocation of police resources in an era when cybercrime was receiving increasing attention, perhaps at the expense of traditional burglary investigation. The victims of the burglary faced a more personal aftermath. Many had lost valuable inventory or family heirlooms stored in their deposit boxes. Insurance claims were complicated by the common practice of keeping incomplete records of safe deposit contents, partly for privacy and partly for tax reasons. Some victims received compensation from their insurers, but others faced significant unrecovered losses. For jewelers who had stored their most valuable stock in the facility, the losses threatened their livelihoods. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Limited itself never recovered from the breach of trust the burglary represented, closing permanently in the aftermath of the crime. As the elderly thieves began serving their sentences, the legend of the Hatton Garden heist grew. It entered the pantheon of famous British crimes, alongside the Great Train Robbery and the Brinksmat gold bullion theft. Unlike those earlier crimes, however, the Hatton Garden burglary contained elements of both tragedy and comedy, the last hurrah of aging criminals facing mortality, attempting one final spectacular score that would cement their criminal legacies. There was something almost admirable about the ambition shown by men who might have been expected to be enjoying quiet retirements rather than drilling through concrete walls. In January 2019, nearly 4 years after the burglary, police finally identified and arrested Michael Seed, believed to be the mysterious Basil, who had eluded capture. Seed, an alarm specialist and electronics expert, was the youngest of the gang at 58. His conviction in March 2019 appeared to close the final chapter on the investigation, though questions remain about the location of much of the unrecovered loot. Some speculate that it may be hidden away, waiting for the eventual release of gang members who might retrieve it in their remaining years. Others believe it has long since been dispersed through international markets for precious stones and metals, untraceable and permanently lost to its original owners. The Hatton Garden safe deposit burglary stands as a reminder that in an age of increasing technological sophistication in both crime and crime prevention, there remains a place for audacity, careful planning, and physical skill in criminal enterprise. The elderly gang brought decades of experience to bear on their target, combining old-school techniques with modern tools to achieve what younger, less patient criminals might have found impossible. Their age, far from being an impediment, provided them with the patience, planning skills, and criminal knowledge accumulated over lifetimes in London's underworld. The Tunnel Masters, the Banco Central burglary. In the sweltering summer heat of Fortaleza, Brazil, a modest 2-story house sat unassumingly on Rua 25 de Março, its freshly painted exterior and newly installed signage, identifying it as the headquarters of a landscaping company. Neighbors had noticed increased activity over the previous months, trucks delivering soil, plants, and gardening equipment, workers coming and going at regular hours, nothing that would raise suspicion in this commercial district of Brazil's fifth largest city. The business appeared to be thriving, with uniformed employees maintaining a professional appearance as they departed each day, ostensibly for landscaping jobs throughout the city. What no one realized was that this ordinary-looking business was an elaborate front for what would become one of the most audacious bank robberies in history, a crime so meticulously planned and flawlessly executed that it would earn grudging admiration even from the authorities tasked with solving it. The landscaping company had opened in early 2005, renting the property for what seemed like a legitimate business expansion. Paulo Sergio de Sousa, the apparent owner, had submitted all the proper documentation, paid his taxes, and even joined the local business association. His employees were polite, well-dressed, and maintained regular business hours from Monday to Saturday. Nothing about their operation suggested criminal intent. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade, an extraordinary plan was unfolding. The landscaping business was not bringing soil and plants into the building merely for distribution to clients. They were disposing of something, tons of earth excavated from what would become a masterpiece of criminal engineering. Beneath the building, a team of skilled excavators was constructing a tunnel. Not a crude passage hastily dug with shovels, but a sophisticated underground corridor stretching more than 255 feet, 78 meters, from the rented house toward a seemingly impossible target, the vault of the Banco Central do Brasil, the Brazilian central bank. The branch contained millions in currency, not just any currency, but untraceable, used banknotes that had been taken out of circulation but not yet destroyed. These notes, while withdrawn from circulation, remained legal tender, making them both immensely valuable and virtually impossible to track once stolen. This compelling target lay beneath one of the most secure buildings in Fortaleza, protected by armed guards, multiple alarm systems, and reinforced concrete walls. What made this bank particularly challenging, and therefore particularly appealing to the sophisticated criminal mind, was that it had no direct connection to outside sewers, tunnels, or other underground structures that typically provide access points for tunnel-based heists. The tunnel itself was a marvel of clandestine engineering. Measuring approximately 1 meter wide by 2 meters high, it was tall enough for a man to stand upright in most sections. The walls were reinforced with wooden braces and lined with plastic tarpaulin to prevent water seepage. The builders had installed a sophisticated ventilation system using PVC pipes that extended to the surface through carefully concealed openings, providing fresh air to the workers below. Most impressively, they had wired the entire length with electric lighting, transforming what might have been a claustrophobic dirt passage into a relatively comfortable workspace. To manage the substantial challenge of excavating through dense clay soil, they had employed electric and pneumatic drills, powered by generators in the house above. The excavation required removing approximately 10 tons of earth, a logistical challenge that would have immediately raised suspicions if not handled carefully. The gang's solution was elegant in its simplicity. They incorporated the soil removal into their landscaping business cover. Earth brought up from the tunnel each night was loaded onto trucks the following morning and transported away as if it were part of their normal business operations. Some was used in legitimate landscaping jobs the company had taken on to maintain their cover. while the remainder was disposed of at construction sites and landfills across the city. This method allowed them to remove massive amounts of soil without attracting attention. The technical challenges didn't end with excavation and soil disposal. The tunnel needed to be precisely aligned to emerge at exactly the right location, directly beneath the bank's vault floor. For this, the gang employed a surveying engineer who used sophisticated equipment to calculate the correct trajectory and depth. The tunnel began 6 feet below the house, descended to a depth of 13 feet to pass safely beneath the street, then gradually rose again to position itself precisely beneath the vault. This required trigonometric calculations and constant measurement to ensure they remained on course throughout the 3-month digging operation. A miscalculation of just a few feet in any direction would have caused them to miss their target entirely, or worse, emerge in a secured area of the bank where they would immediately be detected. As they approached the bank, the tunneling operation became increasingly delicate. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed that the vault floor consisted of nearly a meter of reinforced concrete, a formidable barrier designed specifically to prevent underground access. Breaking through this would require specialized equipment and generate significant noise, risking detection. Their solution demonstrated the level of expertise involved. They employed a combination of specialized concrete drills and carefully calculated thermal lances, tools that use focused heat to cut through reinforced materials. The work was painstaking, with the team working only during weekends, when the bank was closed and the surrounding area quieter, minimizing the risk of the noise being detected. By the first weekend of August 2005, after more than 3 months of tunneling, the team was ready to make their final approach. The tunnel now extended precisely to the point beneath the center of the vault. Using their thermal cutting equipment and concrete drills, they began the delicate process of creating an opening large enough for a person to pass through. The work was excruciatingly slow. Each centimeter of progress through the reinforced floor had to be made without creating vibrations or noise that might trigger the bank's seismic sensors. By Saturday evening, August 6, 2005, they had created an opening measuring approximately 70 by 70 centimeters, large enough for a person to squeeze through into the vault above. The timing was perfect. The bank would remain closed until Monday morning, giving the robbers nearly 48 hours to empty the vault at their leisure. As the first team member emerged through the floor into the cash storage area, he found himself surrounded by containers of used banknotes, stacks of 50 real notes that had been withdrawn from circulation due to wear, but had not yet been destroyed. These notes, while no longer considered suitable for circulation, remained legal tender and, crucially, were untraceable. The vault contained over 160 million reais, approximately $70 million at 2005 exchange rates, more cash than the robbers had anticipated or could possibly transport through their tunnel. Throughout Saturday night and into Sunday, the group worked methodically, passing container after container of cash through the hole in the floor and along the tunnel to the house. Each robber had a specific role. Some remained in the vault selecting containers, others formed a human chain through the tunnel, while others at the house packed the money into bags and boxes for transport. The operation continued without interruption, the team working in shifts to maintain efficiency while managing the physical demands of moving through the confined tunnel space. By early Monday morning, they had removed approximately 3.5 tons of currency, 160 million reais, or roughly $70 million, making it the largest cash heist in Brazilian history, and one of the largest worldwide. The robbery was discovered only when bank employees arrived on Monday morning, August 8th, to find the vault floor breached and mountains of currency missing. Despite the bank's sophisticated security systems, including motion detectors, alarms, and armed guards, no alert had been triggered. The thieves had bypassed the entire security infrastructure by coming up through the floor, a vulnerability that apparently hadn't been considered when the vault was designed. The alarm was raised immediately, with police securing the building and forensic teams descending into the tunnel to begin gathering evidence. What investigators discovered in the tunnel and the rented house revealed the extraordinary level of planning that had gone into the heist. The tunnel was not merely functional, but finished to a high standard, with structural supports, lighting, and ventilation systems that suggested professional engineering knowledge. In the house, they found sophisticated tools, architectural plans of the surrounding area, and evidence of long-term occupation. Most telling was the attention to detail in maintaining their cover story. Legitimate business records for the landscaping company, tax documents, client invoices, and even promotional materials. The gang had created not just a physical tunnel to the bank, but an entire fictional business identity that had withstood scrutiny for months. The investigation quickly became one of the priorities for Brazilian law enforcement. The central bank announced a substantial reward for information, leading to the recovery of the money or the arrest of the perpetrators. Within days, authorities had identified the house's tenant, Paulo Sergio de Sousa, as a person of interest, but he had already disappeared. His identification documents proved to be expertly forged, leaving investigators with few immediate leads. However, the scale and sophistication of the crime suggested an extensive network rather than a small group, increasing the likelihood that someone involved would eventually make a mistake. That mistake came sooner than expected. Just 5 days after the robbery, police in Fortaleza arrested 3 men attempting to spend large amounts of cash at a local car dealership. The men had purchased 6 vehicles worth approximately $250,000, paying entirely in used 50 real notes, the same denomination stolen from the bank. Under questioning, these individuals provided information that led police to a house where they recovered approximately 7.3 million reais, about $3.2 million of the stolen money. This first breakthrough suggested that the discipline, which had characterized the planning and execution of the heist, was beginning to fracture in its aftermath, with participants making conspicuous purchases that drew attention. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded rapidly. Surveillance footage from areas surrounding the bank showed unusual vehicle movements during the weekend of the robbery. Cell phone records revealed communication patterns between suspects. Informants, motivated by the substantial reward, began providing tips about unusual behavior and sudden wealth within criminal circles. By the end of August, police had arrested more than 20 suspects with various levels of involvement, from the core tunneling team to periphery participants who had helped with logistics or money movement. Despite these arrests, the vast majority of the stolen money remained missing. Of the 160 million reais taken, less than 20 million had been recovered by year's end. Police theorized that much of the cash had been quickly moved out of Fortaleza, dispersed through Brazil's extensive criminal networks, and potentially smuggled across borders into neighboring countries. Some may have been used to purchase luxury properties, invested in legitimate businesses as a laundering mechanism, or simply stored in multiple secure locations. The money's age and condition, used notes already withdrawn from circulation, made it particularly difficult to track, as it wouldn't stand out from other worn currency in circulation. As the investigation progressed, the full story of the heist's planning emerged through interrogations and evidence collection. The operation had been conceived nearly 2 years earlier by a group with connections to both Brazil's organized crime networks and individuals with specialized engineering knowledge. The initial surveillance of the bank had been conducted over 6 months, with team members posing as customers, maintenance workers, and even temporarily employed security personnel to gather information about the building's layout and security protocols. The property on Rua 25 de Março had been selected after careful analysis of the surrounding area's geology and the underground distance to the bank vault. The sophistication extended to the team's composition. Rather than relying solely on career criminals, the organizers had recruited individuals with legitimate expertise: an engineer familiar with underground construction, an electrician, a security system specialist, and someone with knowledge of banking operations. This blend of criminal intent and professional knowledge had created a team uniquely qualified to overcome the considerable technical challenges the heist presented. Most remarkably, many of these specialists had no prior criminal records, making them difficult to identify through traditional police methods. By early 2006, Brazilian authorities had charged 31 individuals in connection with the robbery, with crimes ranging from direct participation to money laundering and receiving stolen goods. The sentences varied according to involvement, with the core planners and tunnelers receiving terms of up to 30 years. However, several key suspects remained at large, presumably living under new identities, possibly in other countries, and likely still in possession of substantial portions of the stolen money. International cooperation was sought through Interpol, but the trail grew increasingly cold as time passed. The aftermath of the robbery extended beyond criminal prosecutions. For the banking industry, the Fortaleza heist highlighted a critical vulnerability in vault design. Banks worldwide began reassessing their security, particularly regarding underground access. Many institutions installed seismic sensors beneath their vaults or built facilities on bedrock to make tunneling impossible. Some implemented fiber optic cables embedded in vault floors that would break and trigger alarms if penetrated. The Brazilian central bank itself embarked on a comprehensive security overhaul of all its facilities, implementing standards that would make a similar breach virtually impossible. For the city of Fortaleza, the robbery created an unwanted kind of notoriety. Previously known primarily as a beach tourism destination, it suddenly gained international recognition as the site of one of history's most elaborate heists. Local businesses reported tourists asking to see the famous tunnel or the bank that had been robbed. Some entrepreneurial tour guides even added the site to their city tours, explaining the technical details of the heist to fascinated visitors. This dark tourism eventually faded, but the robbery remained part of the city's modern folklore. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Banco Central burglary was how it captured the public imagination. Unlike violent bank robberies that generate fear and outrage, this heist, with its emphasis on engineering skill and meticulous planning rather than weapons and threats, developed an almost mythic quality. Brazilian media referred to it as the perfect robbery, focusing on the tunneling achievement rather than the criminal act. International news coverage similarly emphasized the technical prowess and planning involved, often drawing comparisons to elaborate heist films. This romanticized portrayal obscured the reality that it was still a major crime that had deprived the Brazilian public of significant funds. The tunnel itself became something of a legend in criminal circles, a gold standard for patience and planning. According to investigators who explored it after the robbery, the passage wasn't merely functional, but finished to an almost professional standard. One detective described it as more like a mining operation than a criminal tunnel, noting the quality of the support structures, ventilation system, and electrical work. Another commented that it represented criminal craftsmanship of the highest order, despite its illicit purpose. The tunnel was eventually filled in and sealed, but photographs and diagrams of its construction continue to circulate in security training programs as an example of the extraordinary lengths determined criminals will go to defeat conventional security measures. As years passed, the Fortaleza heist settled into criminal history alongside legendary tunneling robberies like the 1976 Nice bank robbery in France and the 2015 Hatton Garden safe deposit burglary in London. What distinguished the Brazilian operation was its unprecedented scale, both in the engineering achievement of the tunnel and the quantity of cash successfully removed. While many tunneling heists target safe deposit boxes or smaller vaults, the Fortaleza gang had breached the equivalent of a national treasury facility, accessing currency that was technically government property, rather than private deposits. By 2015, a decade after the robbery, the case had grown cold. Of the 160 million reais stolen, approximately 37 million had been recovered, leaving the vast majority, over $50 million at the time of the theft, unaccounted for. Most of the identified participants had been sentenced and were serving their terms, though several key figures remained fugitives. Occasional rumors surfaced about the missing money. Sightings of known suspects in Argentina or Paraguay, unusual cash purchases in remote Brazilian towns, or tips about buried caches of aging 50 real notes. Each was investigated, but none led to significant recoveries. The legal proceedings related to the heist revealed interesting details about the planning and execution. According to testimony from arrested participants, the team had established strict operational security throughout the project. Cell phones were forbidden near the tunnel entrance. Work schedules were staggered to avoid creating patterns that might attract attention. Different team members were responsible for different aspects of the operation, with many not knowing the identities of all their co-conspirators. This compartmentalization meant that even after multiple arrests, investigators couldn't develop a complete picture of the operation or identify everyone involved. For the financial system, the theft created an unusual problem. The stolen notes had already been withdrawn from circulation but remained legal tender. This meant they could be spent anywhere in Brazil or exchanged for new currency at any bank. With millions of worn 50 real notes legitimately circulating in the economy, distinguishing the stolen bills was virtually impossible unless someone attempted to deposit or exchange large quantities at once. This challenge was compounded by Brazil's largely cash-based economy at the time, where significant legitimate cash transactions were common in many sectors. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Fortaleza heist was its non-violent nature. Unlike many major robberies that involve weapons, threats, or confrontations, this crime was executed without a single person being injured or directly threatened. The tunneling approach meant that no bank employees or security personnel encountered the robbers during the crime. This absence of violence contributed to the public's fascination with the case. It seemed more like an engineering challenge overcome than a threatening criminal act. This perception, while not diminishing the criminality of the theft, placed it in a different category in the public consciousness from armed bank robberies or kidnappings. The Banco central burglary also highlighted a growing sophistication in certain types of criminal enterprise. Rather than relying on force or threats, the perpetrators had invested significant time, resources, and planning into defeating the bank's security through intellect and skill. This represented an evolution in criminal methodology, particularly in regions where banks had hardened their defenses against traditional robbery approaches. By identifying an unconventional vulnerability, the unprotected vault floor, and developing a specialized approach to exploit it, the gang had demonstrated a level of criminal innovation that concerned security experts worldwide. Today, the Fortaleza heist remains one of history's most technically impressive bank robberies. The tunnel, the cover business, the precise excavation technique, and the sheer audacity of targeting a central bank facility set it apart from more common robbery methods. While the crime resulted in significant financial loss and required substantial law enforcement resources to investigate, it has achieved a certain status in criminal lore as an example of what determined planning and specialized skills can accomplish. The case serves as a reminder that security systems must protect against not just forced entry and armed confrontation, but also against patient, methodical approaches that identify and exploit overlooked vulnerabilities. For the residents of Fortaleza, the memory of the heist has gradually faded, though local guides still occasionally point out the building where the famous landscaping company once operated. The tunnel has been filled, the money largely written off, and most of the perpetrators have served their sentences or remain fugitives. Yet the legacy of the robbery persists in banking security protocols, criminal investigation techniques, and popular culture references. The Banco central burglary stands as a testament to criminal ingenuity and patience, a reminder that beneath the surface of ordinary urban life, extraordinary events can unfold, hidden from view until their dramatic revelation. The Italian Job, the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery. On a warm summer morning in July 1987, a charismatic Italian man with movie star good looks and impeccable English walked confidently through the doors of the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center in London. Valerio Vice, dressed in an expensive suit and radiating the self-assurance of legitimate wealth, informed the receptionist that he was interested in renting a safe deposit box. Nothing about this request seemed unusual. The facility, located in the heart of one of London's most affluent neighborhoods, regularly catered to wealthy clients seeking secure storage for their valuables. The staff had no reason to suspect that this charming Italian businessman was actually a career criminal who had fled his native country to escape multiple charges for armed robbery. Nor could they have imagined that they were looking at the architect of what would soon become one of the most lucrative heists in British history. Vice was not alone. A companion accompanied him, equally well-dressed, and presenting the same air of entitled prosperity that was so common among the center's clientele. The two men were escorted to the vault area downstairs, where they were attended to by the manager and security guards responsible for maintaining the facility's reputation for impenetrable security. The Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center housed approximately 4,000 safe deposit boxes, each containing the precious possessions of London's elite: jewelry, gold, cash, valuable collectibles, and documents too sensitive for less secure storage. The facility's client list reportedly included celebrities, nobility, and wealthy foreign nationals who maintained London residences. Each box was accessible only with two keys, one held by the client, one by the center, making unauthorized access theoretically impossible. As the manager began the routine process of showing the vault and explaining the rental procedures, the true nature of the visit was suddenly revealed. Vichay and his accomplice produced handguns, announcing calmly but firmly that this was a robbery. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery. I would advise you not to do anything stupid. My friend and I are serious people." The statement, delivered in Vichay's Italian-accented English, was made without shouting or theatrical threats, a controlled declaration of intent that was perhaps more terrifying in its composure than any emotional outburst would have been. The staff, trained to comply rather than resist in such situations, offered no resistance as they were ordered to lie face down on the floor. What happened next transformed what might have been a conventional armed robbery into something far more elaborate and lucrative. Rather than simply emptying the cash registers or demanding access to specific boxes, Vichy revealed the true scale of his ambition. Using the manager's keys, he let in more accomplices who had been waiting outside, bringing the total number of robbers to about 6. They proceeded to secure the premises completely, binding the hands of staff members and moving them to a location where they couldn't observe what was happening or trigger any alarms. With the facility now under their control, they disabled the alarm systems and set about the main business of the day, breaking into as many safe deposit boxes as possible. The team had come prepared with an impressive array of power tools, drills, cutting equipment, and crowbars specifically selected for the task of opening secure metal boxes. They worked methodically through the vault, breaking open box after box, quickly assessing the contents and taking anything of significant value. The operation demonstrated planning and forethought that went far beyond the opportunistic nature of many robberies. They had studied the facility's layout, understood its security vulnerabilities, and prepared specifically for the technical challenge of breaching hundreds of reinforced metal containers in a limited time. For several hours, the robbery continued uninterrupted. The safe deposit center, with its discreet entrance and privacy-focused operations, was not the type of facility that generated frequent visitors. Most clients accessed their boxes by appointment, meaning that during certain hours, customer traffic was minimal. The robbers exploited this operational pattern, timing their visit for a period when they could reasonably expect few interruptions. When occasional legitimate customers did arrive, they were promptly taken captive and added to the group of restrained staff, the operation continuing with barely a pause. By the time the gang finally departed the premises, they had breached nearly 120 safe deposit boxes. The robbery netted them an extraordinary haul. Estimates ranged from 40 million to 60 million pounds, approximately $98 million at 1987 exchange rates, in jewelry, gold, cash, and other valuables. The true total may never be known, as many safe deposit box holders, for reasons of privacy or tax implications, were reluctant to fully disclose what had been stolen from them. What is certain is that it ranked among the most profitable robberies in British history, eclipsing even the famous Great Train Robbery of 1963, which had netted the equivalent of approximately 40 million pounds in today's value. The investigation began as soon as the staff, having eventually freed themselves from their restraints, contacted police. Scotland Yard's Flying Squad, the specialized unit responsible for investigating commercial robberies in London, took charge of the case. The crime scene presented investigators with both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, the sheer number of deposit boxes breached meant that documenting exactly what had been stolen would be a monumental task, complicated by clients' reluctance to fully disclose their losses. On the other hand, The extended duration of the robbers' presence in the facility meant they had left behind substantial forensic evidence, fingerprints, tool marks, and even cigarette butts that would later prove crucial to identifying the perpetrators. The breakthrough in the case came not from forensic evidence, however, but from human error and an unexpected stroke of luck. Valerio Vice, flush with the success of the robbery and his share of the proceeds, was unable to resist the trappings of extreme wealth. Rather than maintaining a low profile, he embarked on a lavish spending spree, purchasing a Ferrari Testarossa, expensive clothing, and luxury accommodations. This conspicuous consumption attracted attention, particularly when combined with intelligence that had already placed him under suspicion for involvement in other robberies. Surveillance was established, and investigators began building a case. The decisive evidence emerged when Vice, perhaps believing that sufficient time had passed for the heat to have died down, returned to the safe deposit center to retrieve something from his legitimately rented box, the one he had acquired during preliminary reconnaissance for the robbery. This breathtaking act of audacity proved to be his undoing. Forensic evidence collected from the scene matched him definitively to the crime, and when police searched his London residence, they discovered items stolen during the robbery, along with some of the tools used to break into the boxes. In August 1987, just weeks after the heist, police staged coordinated raids across London, arresting Vice and several accomplices. The arrests revealed the composite nature of the criminal team, a mixture of Italian expatriates who had followed Vice to London and local British criminals who had provided logistics, local knowledge, and the necessary equipment. The investigation ultimately identified at least 10 individuals with various levels of involvement in the planning and execution of the robbery. The trial that followed in 1989 captivated the British public, not least because of the flamboyant character of the principal defendant. Valerio Vice, then 31, cut a striking figure in the courtroom. Handsome, articulate, and displaying an almost cinematic criminal charisma that seemed to belong more to fiction than reality. Born in Ancona, Italy, to a respectable family, his father was a lawyer. Vici had rejected conventional paths early in life, turning to crime not out of economic necessity, but apparently for the thrill and the lifestyle it afforded. By the time he arrived in London, he had already been implicated in more than 50 armed robberies in Italy. During the trial, details emerged about the planning and execution of the robbery that highlighted its sophisticated nature. The gang had conducted extensive surveillance of the facility, carefully timing staff rotations and customer patterns. They had identified the optimal moment to strike, when staffing was minimal, but the vault would be open. They had prepared specifically for the technical challenges of breaking into the boxes, bringing specialized tools selected for efficacy and noise reduction. Most importantly, they had developed a clear exit strategy, with plans for the rapid conversion of stolen goods into cash and established routes for moving both the proceeds and themselves out of British jurisdiction if necessary. Vici and his co-defendants were found guilty and received substantial sentences. Vici himself was sentenced to 22 years in prison, though he would not serve the full term in British custody. After serving several years in British prisons, he was transferred to an Italian prison under a prisoner exchange agreement in 1992, ostensibly to serve the remainder of his sentence closer to his family. The Italian penal system, however, offered more liberal furlough provisions than its British counterpart, allowing Vici occasional leaves from prison, opportunities he reportedly used to maintain his criminal connections and continue enjoying aspects of his former lifestyle. The aftermath of the robbery extended beyond the criminal proceedings. For the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Center, the heist represented both a security disaster and a potentially existential threat to its business model. A facility that had marketed itself based on impregnable security had been comprehensively breached, with hundreds of clients suffering substantial losses. The insurance implications were enormous, with claims running into the tens of millions of pounds. While the center implemented enhanced security measures in the wake of the robbery, the damage to its reputation proved difficult to repair. Within a few years, new ownership and a complete rebranding would attempt to distance the business from the notorious events of 1987. For many of the victims, the recovery of their property proved elusive. Despite the relatively quick apprehension of the principal perpetrators, much of the stolen property had already been dispersed, sold through various channels, some legitimate and some underground. Cash had been laundered or spent, jewelry potentially recut or melted down, and many items simply disappeared into the international market for high-value goods. The recovery rate for stolen items ultimately remained disappointingly low, with many victims receiving only insurance compensation rather than their actual possessions. The story of Valerio Vice took a dramatic final turn in April 2000, having been granted day release from prison in Italy, where he was serving the remainder of his sentence. Vice died in a shootout with police near Ancona. The circumstances were fitting for a man who had lived his life with theatrical criminal flair. He was supposedly visiting his father's grave on a sanctioned release when he engaged in a high-speed chase and gun battle with police officers who had been monitoring him. It was a violent end to a life characterized by risk-taking and an almost pathological pursuit of excitement and wealth. The Knightsbridge security deposit robbery has secured its place in the annals of famous heists, not just because of the enormous value of the stolen items, but because of the almost cinematic nature of the crime and its principal perpetrator. The combination of meticulous planning, brazen execution, and the charismatic figure at its center created a narrative that continues to fascinate true crime enthusiasts. It represents a particular type of high-stakes robbery that characterized the 1980s, an era before advanced digital security systems and comprehensive CCTV coverage made such operations significantly more difficult to execute. Security experts still study the case for its demonstration of how vulnerable even seemingly impregnable facilities can be when targeted by determined criminals with a sophisticated understanding of their operations. The robbery highlighted the critical importance of rigorous staff training, duress systems that can be activated discreetly, and the need for multi-layered security that doesn't rely solely on the integrity of the main entrance. Modern safe deposit facilities have implemented numerous additional safeguards specifically designed to prevent the kind of takeover scenario that Vici and his team executed so effectively. For all its notoriety, the Knightsbridge robbery also represented a transitional moment in criminal methodology. It stood at the intersection of traditional armed robbery techniques and the more sophisticated approach that would increasingly characterize high-value thefts in subsequent decades. While Vice and his team relied on weapons to gain initial control of the facility, a conventional armed robbery approach, the scale of their ambition and the meticulous planning involved pointed toward the more elaborate methodology that would become evident in later heists like the Antwerp diamond theft or the Hatton Garden safety deposit burglary. What sets the Knightsbridge robbery apart from many comparable crimes is the personality of its mastermind. Valerio Vice was not a desperate criminal driven by financial necessity, nor was he a shadowy figure who avoided the limelight. He was, by multiple accounts, a man who committed crimes as much for the excitement and identity they provided as for the material rewards. In interviews given after his conviction, he spoke of robbery as an art form and described the adrenaline rush of his criminal activities as better than any drug. This self-mythologizing perspective, combined with his cinematic good looks and charisma, created a criminal persona that has maintained public fascination long after the events themselves. The legacy of the robbery extends beyond its impact on security practices or its place in criminal history. It entered popular culture as a reference point for the quintessential high-stakes heist, even allegedly influencing aspects of film and television depictions of similar crimes. The 2008 British film The Bank Job, though based on a different 1971 robbery, incorporated elements reminiscent of the Knightsbridge case in its portrayal of safe deposit box theft. The case has been featured in numerous true crime documentaries and books, typically highlighting both the audacious nature of the crime and the flamboyant character of its mastermind. What remains most remarkable about the Knightsbridge security deposit robbery, perhaps, is how it combined so many elements of the classic heist narrative: the charismatic mastermind, the carefully assembled team, the meticulous planning, the daring execution, and the enormous payoff. It represented a crime that, while unquestionably serious in its impact on victims, captured public imagination in a way that more violent or destructive criminal acts rarely do. In the pantheon of famous robberies, it stands as an example of criminal ambition and planning, taken to extraordinary lengths, a case where reality approached the dramatic tension and narrative satisfaction more commonly found in fiction. For the staff who experienced the robbery firsthand, however, there was nothing romantic about the experience. The psychological impact of being held at gunpoint, restrained, and threatened, even if with the controlled menace that characterized Viché's approach rather than explicit brutality, left lasting trauma. Several employees required counseling after the incident, and some never returned to work in the security industry. Their experience serves as a necessary reminder of the human cost that exists beneath the sometimes romanticized portrayal of high-profile heists. The Knightsbridge case also illuminates an often overlooked aspect of safe deposit box facilities: the inherent tension between security and client privacy. Many facilities then and now market themselves based on discretion and minimal documentation of box contents, an approach that appeals to clients seeking privacy, but also creates an environment where the true value of stored items remains unknown until a theft occurs. The Sewer Rat, the French Bank, Sewer Heist. In the summer of 1976, the sun-drenched streets of Nice, France, bustled with tourists enjoying the Mediterranean climate and glamorous atmosphere of the Côte d'Azur. While vacationers occupied themselves with beaches and cafes, a group of men quietly rented a modest commercial space 2 blocks from the Société Générale Bank on Avenue Jean Médecin. To passers-by, the storefront appeared to be undergoing renovation, with workers occasionally carrying building materials in and out. A small sign indicated it would soon open as a leather goods shop. The workers themselves seemed unremarkable, middle-aged men diligently preparing a new business. Neighbors noted nothing suspicious about their activities, though some recalled that work often continued late into the night. What no one realized was that these supposed renovations concealed one of the most audacious bank heists ever attempted, a plan to break into the Société Générale's supposedly impregnable vault, not from above or through its walls, but from below, through the labyrinthine sewer system that ran beneath the elegant streets of Nice. The mastermind behind this extraordinary scheme was Albert Spaghiari, a 44-year-old photographer and former paratrooper whose life to that point had been as colorful as it was checkered. Born in Laragne-Montéglin in 1932, Spaghiari had served in the French military during the Indochina War before briefly joining the OAS, a paramilitary group opposed to Algerian independence. After a period of relative stability running a photography studio in Nice, he had apparently grown restless with conventional life. What prompted his turn to grand larceny remains speculative. Some accounts suggest financial difficulties. Others point to simple boredom and thrill-seeking. What is certain is that the plan he devised combined military precision with theatrical flair in equal measure. Spaghiari had assembled a team of approximately 10 men, carefully selected for specific skills and absolute discretion. The group included experts in excavation, structural engineering, alarm systems, and safe-cracking. Many were veterans of various military services, bringing with them the discipline and specialized knowledge that such a complex operation would require. The team understood from the beginning that this would be no ordinary robbery, but a meticulously planned operation requiring months of preparation, precision timing, and extraordinary physical effort. What they aimed to access was the underground vault of the Société Générale Bank, which housed hundreds of private safe deposit boxes containing cash, jewelry, negotiable securities, and other valuables stored by wealthy residents and businesses of the French Riviera. The plan began with intensive research into the sewer infrastructure beneath Nice. Historical maps were obtained, supplemented by the team's own clandestine explorations of the underground network. They identified a main sewer line that ran directly beneath the bank building, positioned approximately 8 meters below the vault floor. From this starting point, they calculated the precise location where they would need to tunnel upward to breach the vault. The sewer itself would serve multiple purposes, providing a concealed access route to their target, a means of removing excavated material without attracting attention, and potentially an escape path if things went wrong. Behind the false front of their rented storefront, the team created an entrance to the sewer system. Working primarily at night to avoid detection, they carefully removed sections of the shop's floor, then excavated downward until they breached the sewer tunnel ceiling. The work was arduous and unpleasant, conducted in cramped, fetid conditions. The sewer tunnels of Nice, while larger than those in many cities thanks to their design to handle seasonal flooding, were still confined spaces filled with noxious odors and potential health hazards. Team members worked in shifts, wearing protective gear and using portable ventilation equipment to make the conditions marginally tolerable. Once access to the main sewer line was established, the more technical phase of the operation began. Using the calculations they had made from maps and their own measurements, the team identified the precise point in the sewer ceiling above which the bank vault was located. Here, they began the painstaking process of tunneling upward through approximately 8 meters of earth and concrete. This vertical shaft had to be precisely aligned. Any significant deviation would cause them to miss their target entirely. It also had to be structurally sound, requiring wooden bracing to prevent collapse. The excavation generated substantial amounts of soil and concrete debris, which had to be discreetly removed through the sewer system and disposed of without raising suspicion. The work proceeded slowly but steadily throughout the summer of 1976. The team maintained their cover story of preparing to open a leather goods shop, occasionally bringing in actual shop fittings and materials to support the facade. Meanwhile, beneath the streets, they were making gradual progress on their tunnel. The engineering challenges were substantial, ensuring proper alignment, managing groundwater seepage, maintaining structural integrity, and solving ventilation issues. These were compounded by the need for absolute secrecy and the physical discomfort of working in the sewer environment. Despite these challenges, by early July, they had nearly reached the foundation of the bank vault. The vault floor presented the final and most formidable barrier, constructed of reinforced concrete specifically designed to prevent exactly this type of intrusion. It would require specialized equipment and techniques to breach without creating noise that might alert security personnel or passers-by above. The team employed a combination of diamond-tipped drills and manual tools, working with painstaking slowness to minimize sound. The process took several weeks, but eventually they created an opening just large enough for a person to squeeze through into the vault above. By an extraordinary stroke of luck, or perhaps careful planning, the team completed their tunnel just before Bastille Day weekend, when the bank would be closed for an extended period. On the evening of July 16th, 1976, after the bank had closed for the weekend, Spaggiari and his team made their final approach through the sewer and up their tunnel. Emerging through the floor of the vault, they found themselves surrounded by rows of safe deposit boxes, 937 in total, containing the accumulated wealth and secrets of some of Nice's most affluent residents and visitors. What followed was a weekend-long plundering of breathtaking proportions. The team had brought specialized tools to open the deposit boxes, drills, cutting equipment, and various implements designed to defeat locks without causing excessive damage that might alert staff when they eventually returned. They worked methodically, opening box after box, evaluating contents, and taking only the most valuable and easily transportable items. They were selective rather than indiscriminate, focusing on cash, gold, jewelry, and bearer bonds while leaving behind bulkier valuables that would be difficult to transport through their tunnel or to dispose of later. Throughout the weekend, the thieves maintained extraordinary discipline. They took regular breaks for meals, which they consumed inside the vault, a detail that would later capture public imagination. They even reportedly brought along a portable gas stove to heat food and make coffee. These meals in the vault represented not just practical necessity, but a certain theatrical flourish that would later become part of the Heists legend. The team understood that they had the luxury of time. The bank would remain closed until Monday morning, and they used it to maximize their haul while minimizing the physical strain on themselves. By Sunday evening, having spent nearly 2 days inside the vault, the thieves had opened and emptied approximately 400 of the 937 safe deposit boxes. They had accumulated a haul estimated at between 30 and 60 million francs, approximately $30 million in today's values, though the exact amount would never be determined due to the private nature of safe deposit box contents. The stolen items included an estimated 15 million francs in cash, along with jewelry, gold, and bearer securities. Having gathered all they could reasonably transport and conceal, they prepared for their departure. Before leaving, Spaggiari reportedly spray-painted a message on the vault wall: "Sans armes ni haine, ni violence," without weapons, hatred, or violence. This theatrical gesture, combined with the nature of the crime itself, which had indeed been executed without weapons or threats to bank personnel, would contribute significantly to the romantic image that would later surround the heist. It positioned the crime not as a violent robbery, but as a sophisticated feat of engineering and planning, a distinction that would prove important in how the public, and to some extent the authorities, perceived the crime. The thieves departed through the same tunnel they had created, carefully removing evidence of their presence from the vault itself. They transported their substantial haul through the sewer system and back to their rented storefront, where it was temporarily hidden before being gradually moved to more secure locations. By the time bank employees arrived on Monday morning to discover the breached vault floor and emptied deposit boxes, Spaghiari and his team had disappeared, along with their impressive bounty. The discovery of the heist sparked immediate and intense investigation. The sophistication of the approach, tunneling through the sewer system to access the vault from below, initially baffled investigators. The bank's conventional security measures focused on securing doors, windows, and the vault door itself had been rendered irrelevant by the unexpected vector of attack. Forensic teams descended into the sewers, following the tunnel back to its origin at the rented storefront. There, they found evidence of the extensive work that had gone into the operation, though the perpetrators themselves had vanished. The breakthrough in the case came from an unexpected source. Following the heist, one of the team members apparently boasted about his involvement to a friend, who subsequently became an informant for the police. This led to the identification of Spaghiari as the mastermind. In October 1976, approximately 3 months after the robbery, police arrested Spaghiari at his photography studio in Nice. Under questioning, he initially denied involvement, but eventually confessed, apparently unable to resist taking credit for what he saw as a masterpiece of criminal planning and execution. What followed next added another extraordinary chapter to an already remarkable story. While awaiting trial in 1977, Spaghiari was brought to the office of investigating Magistrate Judge Richard Boaziz to review evidence. During this meeting, Spaghiari asked the judge if he could look more closely at a document on the desk. When the judge obliged, Spaghiari suddenly leaped through the office window, landing on the roof of a waiting car several meters below. He clung to the roof as the vehicle sped away, disappearing into the streets of Nice before authorities could respond. This dramatic escape, which seemed more fitting for a film than reality, further cemented Spaghiari's legend and transformed him from merely a clever thief to a folkloric figure of almost mythic proportions. Despite one of the most intensive manhunts in French history, Spaghiari was never recaptured. He reportedly fled to Argentina, where he lived under various aliases. During his years as a fugitive, he maintained his flair for the dramatic, occasionally sending photographs of himself to French authorities or giving clandestine interviews to journalists. He even supposedly published an autobiography titled Les Égouts du Paradis, The Sewers of Paradise, in 1978, detailing his planning and execution of the heist. Though the book was published under a pseudonym, it was widely believed to be Spaghiari's work, combining genuine details of the robbery with embellishments designed to enhance his own legend. Meanwhile, French authorities continued their investigation into the wider conspiracy. Several of Spaghiari's accomplices were eventually identified and arrested, though most of the stolen items were never recovered. The complete roster of participants has never been definitively established, with estimates ranging from 8 to 20 individuals involved in various capacities. The sophistication of the operation, particularly the engineering aspects of the tunnel construction, suggested that Spaghiari had recruited individuals with specialized skills far beyond those of ordinary criminals. The Nice sewer heist captured public imagination, in a way few crimes do. Part of this fascination stemmed from the non-violent nature of the crime. No bank employees had been threatened, no weapons brandished, no hostages taken. The technical ingenuity required to tunnel through the sewer system and breach the vault floor from below spoke to a level of planning and execution that bordered on artistry. Spaggiari's theatrical flourishes, the message left on the vault wall, his spectacular escape from custody, added narrative elements that seemed drawn from fiction rather than reality. Even his background as a photographer, paratrooper, and political activist contributed to an image more complex than that of a typical bank robber. This public perception was not universal, however. For the victims, primarily wealthy individuals and businesses whose safe deposit boxes had been plundered, the crime was far from victimless. Many lost valuable jewelry, family heirlooms, and substantial cash reserves. Some had used their boxes to store items that were uninsured or undeclared for tax purposes, making financial recovery impossible. For these individuals, Spaggiari was not a romantic figure, but a thief who had caused genuine loss and distress. For security experts, the heist represented a sobering reminder of the vulnerability of even the most sophisticated security systems to unexpected vectors of attack. In its aftermath, banks worldwide reassessed their vault designs, with many installing seismic sensors capable of detecting tunneling activity beneath their facilities. Some institutions constructed their vaults on bedrock or incorporated steel plates into floor designs specifically to prevent similar breaches. The security industry incorporated the Nice case into training materials as a classic example of thinking outside the box, or in this case, beneath it. Albert Spaggiari never faced justice for his crime. He reportedly died of throat cancer in Italy in 1989, having lived as a fugitive for more than a decade. Even his death became part of his legend. There were rumors that he had faked his passing to escape ongoing pursuit, though these were never substantiated. His body was returned to France and buried in Laragne-Montéglin, his birthplace. To the end, he maintained the romanticized version of his crime, presenting himself not as a thief, but as a mastermind who had orchestrated a perfect heist, one executed, as his vault wall message proclaimed, without weapons, hatred, or violence. The legacy of the Nice sewer heist extends beyond its impact on bank security protocols. It has entered popular culture as an archetypal example of the perfect crime, referenced in films, books, and television shows dealing with elaborate heists. Elements of Spaggiari's methodology, tunneling approaches, timing operations to coincide with holiday weekends, and focusing on safe deposit boxes rather than bank funds, have been adopted by other criminals, though rarely with the same degree of success. The case is studied in criminal justice courses as an example of both sophisticated criminal methodology and the investigative techniques used to solve such crimes. What remains most remarkable about the Nice sewer heist is how it combined technical sophistication with theatrical presentation. Spaggiari understood that the planning and execution of the robbery represented only part of its story. Equally important was the narrative that would surround it afterward. By emphasizing the nonviolent nature of the crime, executing a dramatic escape from custody, and cultivating his image through his subsequent life as a fugitive, he transformed what might have been simply another bank robbery into an enduring criminal legend. In doing so, he created not just a crime, but a story, one that continues to fascinate decades after the event itself. For all its drama and ingenuity, however, the Nice sewer heist ultimately represents a serious crime that caused significant financial and emotional harm to its victims. The romantic image that has grown around it obscures this reality, focusing instead on the audacity of the plan and the charisma of its mastermind. This tension between admiration for the technical achievement and recognition of the criminal nature of the act characterizes much of the public response to elaborate heists, creating a moral ambiguity that continues to complicate our understanding of such crimes and the individuals who commit them. The sewers beneath Nice no longer offer the opportunity that Spagliari exploited. Modern detection systems, enhanced vault designs, and improved security protocols have rendered his specific methodology obsolete. Yet the principle he demonstrated, that determined criminals will identify and exploit unexpected vulnerabilities, remains relevant to security planning today. In this sense, the legacy of the Nice sewer heist extends beyond its place in criminal history to influence ongoing conversations about how we protect our most valuable assets against threats that might emerge from unexpected directions, even from beneath our feet. The doomed diamond heist, the Millennium Dome robbery. As dawn broke over London on November 7th, 2000, a thick fog rolled across the Thames River, shrouding the distinctive white canopy of the Millennium Dome in a spectral haze. The massive exhibition space, constructed to celebrate the turn of the millennium and showcase British achievements, had been operational for nearly a year. Inside, among various exhibitions celebrating human innovation and culture, sat one of the most ambitious jewelry displays ever assembled in the United Kingdom. At its center gleamed the Millennium Star, a flawless 203-carat diamond valued at approximately £200 million, $324 million, accompanied by 12 rare blue diamonds collectively worth another £200 million. This breathtaking collection, on loan from De Beers, was housed in a high-security display called the Money Zone, protected by bulletproof glass and sophisticated alarm systems. On this misty November morning, however, these precautions were about to be tested by one of the most audacious robbery attempts in British history. As early morning commuters made their way across London, a group of men approached the Dome from the Thames riverbank. Their transportation was unconventional but tactically sound, a high-powered speedboat designed for rapid movement across the river. The vessel was carefully chosen as both an entry and escape vehicle, allowing the team to bypass London's congested roads and potentially evade traditional police pursuit vehicles. This first indication of the operation's sophisticated planning would soon be matched by equally dramatic methods. The gang, consisting of at least 7 men, had equipped themselves with an arsenal that reflected both meticulous preparation and a willingness to use overwhelming force. They carried smoke bombs, nail guns, sledgehammers, gas masks, and, most alarmingly, firearms, including an automatic weapon. Their most dramatic piece of equipment, however, was a JCB excavator, a massive piece of construction machinery that had been stolen from a nearby work site the previous day. This formidable vehicle was intended as their battering ram, capable of smashing through the dome's perimeter fencing and creating both a distraction and an entry point for the robbery team. At approximately 9:30 a.m., as the dome was opening to visitors, the operation began. The JCB excavator crashed through the perimeter fence, creating a breach large enough for the robbery team to enter. Simultaneously, team members deployed smoke bombs, filling areas of the dome with thick, disorienting smoke. The timing was calculated to coincide with the regular morning deliveries, when security might be distracted and additional vehicles in the area would not immediately raise suspicion. Staff and early visitors stood frozen in shock as masked figures in gas masks moved purposefully through the smoke toward the Money Zone exhibition. Upon reaching the display, the robbers deployed their nail guns and sledgehammers with practiced efficiency, attempting to breach the reinforced glass, protecting the diamonds. Their plan was to grab the Millennium Star and blue diamonds, retreat through the smoke to their waiting speedboat, and escape down the Thames before police could establish an effective cordon. The entire operation was timed to take less than 5 minutes, from breach to escape, a window calculated to be shorter than the standard police response time for that area of London. What the robbers didn't know was that their supposedly brilliant plan had been compromised from the start. For months, the Flying Squad, an elite division of London's Metropolitan Police specialized in foiling armed robberies, had been receiving intelligence about a potential heist targeting the Millennium Star. In response, they had launched Operation Magician, one of the largest surveillance operations in the squad's history. The diamonds on display in the dome were not the actual Millennium Star and blue diamonds, but precise replicas. The real gems had been secretly removed and secured elsewhere as soon as credible intelligence about the potential robbery emerged. More significantly, the dome itself had been transformed into an elaborate trap. Disguised police officers had infiltrated the security staff and exhibition personnel. Surveillance experts monitored every approach to the dome, including the river. A rapid response team was positioned nearby, ready to deploy at the first sign of the robbery commencing. Even the morning fog, which the robbers likely saw as beneficial for concealing their approach, served the police by providing cover for their surveillance operations. As the robbers attacked the display case, believing themselves moments away from securing one of the largest diamond hauls in history, the trap was sprung. Police officers who had been disguised as cleaning staff, exhibition workers, and even members of the public suddenly revealed themselves, surrounding the robbers with overwhelming force. The Flying Squad's armed response team simultaneously moved in to secure the scene and neutralize the threat posed by the robbers' weapons. The speed and coordination of the police response left the robbery team with no opportunity for resistance or escape. Within minutes, all members of the gang present inside the dome were face down on the floor in handcuffs. The entire operation had been executed with such precision that not a single shot was fired, and no visitors or staff members were injured. The speedboat pilot, waiting on the Thames for his accomplices who would never arrive, was similarly apprehended by river police. The only damage was to the perimeter fence breached by the excavator and the display case, which had withstood the robbery attempt long enough for police to intervene. The sophistication of the attempted robbery was matched only by the comprehensiveness of its failure. What had been planned as a daring, precisely timed heist that would enter criminal folklore alongside legendary diamond thefts had instead become one of the most successful preemptive police operations in British history. The robbers, who had expected to be speeding down the Thames with £400 million in diamonds, instead found themselves in police custody, facing charges that would lead to lengthy prison sentences. As details of the attempted robbery and the police operation to foil it emerged, both the audacity of the criminals and the effectiveness of the police response captivated public attention. The ringleaders were identified as a group of London-based career criminals, several with previous convictions for armed robbery and similar offenses. Their planning had been meticulous in many respects. The choice of a waterborne escape route was tactically sound, and the use of the excavator as a breaching tool demonstrated creative problem-solving. The timing of the operation, coinciding with the morning delivery window, showed an understanding of the dome's operational patterns. What had gone wrong for the robbery team was not a failure of execution, but a fundamental compromise of their operational security. Months earlier, police informants had provided the first hints of the plot, allowing the flying squad to begin their counter-operation well in advance. Surveillance of known criminal associates had yielded additional details, including potential targets and methodology. Most critically, the robbers had conducted multiple reconnaissance visits to the dome, carefully studying the layout, security arrangements, and display cases, never realizing that their unusual interest in the security aspects of the exhibition had itself been noted and reported. The prosecution of the gang members revealed additional details about both the planned robbery and the police operation to prevent it. The gang had conducted practice runs, tested their equipment, and established precise timings for each phase of the operation. They had acquired specialized knowledge about the display case construction and had selected their tools specifically to defeat these security measures. They had even planned for contingencies such as traffic delays or security personnel variations, demonstrating a level of planning that would have been impressive had it not been directed toward criminal ends. The police operation, codenamed Magician, represented an equally impressive feat of planning and coordination. Once alerted to the potential robbery, the flying squad had made the critical decision not to simply increase visible security, which might have deterred the attempt but allowed the criminals to escape prosecution, but instead to create an elaborate sting operation. This required extraordinary coordination between multiple police divisions, including specialized firearms units, the Marine Policing Unit, surveillance teams, and undercover officers. The replacement of the real diamonds with replicas had been conducted with such secrecy that even most dome staff remained unaware of the substitution. The trial that followed resulted in sentences ranging from 5 to 18 years for the various participants, with the ringleaders receiving the heaviest penalties. Beyond the attempted theft itself, prosecutors emphasized the potential danger posed to the public by the robbers' methods. The use of smoke bombs in a crowded public venue could have caused panic and injuries. The presence of firearms indicated a willingness to threaten or potentially use deadly force. These aggravating factors influenced both the charges brought against the gang members and the sentences ultimately imposed. For the flying squad, the operation represented a signature success in their long history of combating organized robbery in London. The use of advanced intelligence, careful surveillance, and the patience to allow the crime to unfold to the point of providing irrefutable evidence demonstrated the evolution of police tactics in addressing sophisticated robbery attempts. Rather than simply reacting to crimes after they occurred, the operation showcased preventative policing that both stopped the crime and ensured the participants faced justice. For the security industry, the attempted dome robbery provided valuable lessons about both vulnerabilities and effective countermeasures. The incident highlighted the continuing threat posed by smash-and-grab techniques, even against high-security displays in public venues. It demonstrated the importance of human intelligence and surveillance, in addition to physical security measures. Perhaps most significantly, it emphasized that truly valuable items, such as the Millennium Star, require security protocols that extend beyond their immediate display environment to encompass comprehensive threat assessment and response planning. The Millennium Dome itself, which had struggled to attract the visitor numbers originally projected and had faced criticism as a costly government project, received an unexpected public relations boost from the incident. The dramatic robbery attempt and its equally dramatic foiling generated international media coverage and renewed public interest in the exhibition. Some commentators noted the irony that one of the most successful aspects of the Millennium exhibition, in terms of capturing public attention, was an event that had never been planned as part of the program. What makes the Millennium Dome robbery attempt particularly noteworthy in the pantheon of famous heists is the stark contrast between its ambition and its outcome. Many celebrated robberies are remembered for their success, the methodical planning that allowed criminals to overcome sophisticated security measures and escape with valuable items. The Dome case inverts this narrative, showcasing equally methodical planning by law enforcement that transformed an audacious robbery attempt into a textbook example of crime prevention. This inversion extends to how we understand the narrative of the event itself. In successful heists, we often focus on the ingenuity of the criminals, sometimes with a degree of reluctant admiration for their technical accomplishment, if not their moral choices. In the Dome case, this same spotlight falls instead on the police operation, the patient surveillance, the careful counter-planning, and the disciplined execution that allowed dozens of officers to remain hidden in plain sight until the perfect moment to act. The Millennium Star itself, the flawless diamond at the center of this drama, continued its journey after the attempted robbery. The diamond, discovered in the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1990, was purchased by De Beers and cut over 3 years into its perfect pear shape. After the Millennium exhibition concluded and the robbery case was resolved, it was eventually displayed in other secure exhibitions worldwide. Its value, already extraordinary at the time of the robbery attempt, has likely increased in the intervening years as large, flawless diamonds of this quality become increasingly rare finds. For London's criminal underworld, the failed Dome robbery served as a sobering reminder of the flying squad's capabilities and the risks of targeting high-profile valuables in the city. The comprehensive nature of the police operation, which had allowed the robbers to proceed to the point of maximum evidence gathering before intervening, demonstrated a level of patience and strategic thinking that matched or exceeded that of the criminal planners themselves. This likely had a deterrent effect on similar high-profile robbery attempts in the years that followed. Security protocols for major diamond and jewelry exhibitions worldwide were influenced by lessons learned from the Dome incident. The practice of creating and displaying precise replicas while securing the original items elsewhere became more common for extraordinarily valuable pieces. Integration of physical security with human intelligence and surveillance was emphasized in security planning. The vulnerability of display cases to brute force attacks, even those constructed with bulletproof glass and other hardening measures, led to innovations in both materials and design for high-security exhibitions. Perhaps the most lasting legacy of the Millennium Dome robbery attempt is its status as a cautionary tale about the limits of criminal planning when confronted with effective intelligence operations. The robbers had created what they believed to be a perfect plan, one that accounted for security measures, timed phases of the operation precisely, and incorporated innovative approaches to both entry and escape. What they could not plan for was that the entire operation was compromised from its inception, with their targets replaced and their every move anticipated by the very authorities they sought to evade. In this sense, the Millennium Dome case serves as a counterpoint to successful heists where security services were outmaneuvered or caught by surprise. It reminds us that for every robbery that succeeds due to careful planning and execution, others fail because equally careful planning occurs on the law enforcement side of the equation. the dramatic nature of the attempt and its foiling, with high-value diamonds, speedboats, excavators, smoke bombs, and disguised officers, simply makes this particular example more cinematically compelling than most. 2 decades after the attempted robbery, the Millennium Dome has been renamed the O2 and repurposed as an entertainment venue rather than an exhibition space. The money zone and its valuable diamonds are long gone, replaced by concert areas, restaurants, and shops. Yet for those who study criminal methodology or law enforcement techniques, the events of November 7, 2000 remain significant. A case study in both criminal ambition and the sophisticated counter-strategies that can render such ambition futile. The story of the Millennium Dome robbery carries a certain irony that distinguishes it from other famous heists. The robbers, in their pursuit of diamonds worth £400 million, instead secured lengthy prison sentences and a place in criminal history, not as successful masterminds, but as examples of overreach and failure. Meanwhile, the flying squad officers who thwarted them achieved one of the most successful prevention operations in British police history, transforming what might have been a disastrous theft into a textbook demonstration of effective law enforcement. In the final accounting, the real brilliance on display that November morning was not the diamond that the robbers never reached, but the careful, patient police work that ensured they never would. The perfect burglary, the United California bank heist. In the affluent coastal community of Laguna Niguel, California, the spring of 1972 unfolded with its typical Mediterranean charm. Residents of this Orange County paradise went about their business beneath palm trees and clear blue skies, unaware that their quiet community was about to become the site of one of the most sophisticated bank burglaries in American history. The target was the United California Bank, housed in a modern single-story building at the Monarch Bay Plaza shopping center, an unassuming structure that gave no indication of the extraordinary security measures protecting its vault, nor of the determined criminals who were meticulously planning to defeat them. The mastermind behind this audacious plan was Emil Dincio, a 47-year-old career criminal from Youngstown, Ohio, who had developed a reputation as one of the most skilled bank burglars in the country. Unlike the stereotypical bank robber who confronts tellers with demands and threats, Dincio specialized in burglary, the art of defeating security systems and physical barriers to access bank vaults during closed hours, without confrontation or violence. By 1972, he had already successfully broken into dozens of bank vaults across the Midwest, developing techniques that allowed him to bypass alarm systems that most security professionals considered impenetrable. What had drawn Dincio's attention to this particular bank, nearly 2,000 miles from his Ohio base of operations, was intelligence suggesting an exceptional opportunity. According to information provided by an associate with connections to organized crime, the United California Bank's Laguna Niguel branch contained safe deposit boxes holding millions in cash, jewelry, and other valuables belonging to wealthy Orange County residents. Most tantalizingly, rumors circulated that the bank held cash reserves from Jimmy Hoffa's Teamsters Union, illicit funds that would be both substantial and unreportable if stolen. Whether these rumors were accurate or not, they provided sufficient motivation for Dincio to assemble his team and develop what would become one of the most meticulously planned burglaries of the era. Dincio recruited a crew of 6 men, including his brother James Dincio, his nephews Harry and Ronald Barber, and trusted associates Charles Mulligan, Phil Christopher, and Charles Bruckle. Each brought specialized skills essential to the operation. expertise in alarm systems, safe cracking techniques, surveillance, or other aspects of professional burglary. Most were fellow Youngstown natives, part of a close-knit criminal network that had worked together on previous jobs and developed an operational rapport that minimized the need for explicit communication during the burglary itself. Preparation began months before the actual burglary. In early 1972, advanced team members traveled to California to conduct preliminary surveillance on the target. They rented accommodation in the area, posing as businessmen considering local investment opportunities, a cover story that allowed them to explore the community without raising suspicion. During this phase, they studied the bank's physical layout, identified security measures visible from public areas, observed staff routines, and began developing their approach strategy. The intelligence gathered during this initial surveillance revealed both challenges and opportunities. The United California Bank branch was equipped with state-of-the-art security systems for 1972, including magnetic door sensors, motion detectors, and vibration-sensitive alarms designed to detect attempted breaches of the vault. The vault itself featured reinforced concrete walls, a massive steel door, and a sophisticated combination lock that would resist conventional forced entry techniques. However, the team also identified a potential vulnerability. The bank's roof appeared to be a standard commercial construction without the same level of reinforcement as the walls and doors. After this preliminary assessment, Dincio returned to Youngstown to finalize the team and assemble the specialized equipment they would need. The group then reconvened in California in March 1972, renting a house in Leisure World, a retirement community in Laguna Hills, approximately 7 miles from the target bank. This location provided both proximity to their target and an inconspicuous base of operations. Few would suspect that a group of bank burglars would establish themselves in a quiet retirement community. From this base, the team conducted intensive surveillance of the bank for several weeks, establishing patterns of activity, security response times, and the schedules of bank employees, security personnel, and local law enforcement patrols. They identified the optimal time for the burglary, the weekend of March 24th to 26th, 1972, when the bank would be closed for an extended period, giving them maximum time to work without interruption. During this planning phase, they also acquired the specialized tools they would need, including drills, cutting equipment, electronic devices for defeating alarm systems, and communications gear. As the selected weekend approached, the team finalized their plan. They would access the bank through the roof, bypassing the heavily secured doors and windows. Once inside, they would neutralize the alarm systems before cutting through the ceiling of the vault, using techniques that Dincio had refined over years of similar operations. Upon accessing the vault, they would focus on the safe deposit boxes rather than the cash teller's drawers or the main bank safe, maximizing both the value of their haul and the time before discovery, as safe deposit box holders might not access their boxes for weeks or even months. On Friday night, March 24th, 1972, after the bank had closed for the weekend, the operation began. The team approached the Monarch Bay Plaza under cover of darkness, using routes they had carefully planned to avoid security cameras and night watchmen at nearby businesses. Upon reaching the bank, they used a ladder to access the roof, where they began the delicate process of creating an entry point. Using drills and saws designed to minimize noise, they cut through the roofing material, creating an opening approximately 2 feet square, just large enough for a person to pass through. Before entering, the team employed sophisticated techniques to defeat the bank's alarm system. Using a radio frequency detector, they identified the frequencies used by the alarm system and employed a jamming device to prevent signals from reaching the central monitoring station. Additionally, they utilized thermal blankets to defeat infrared motion sensors within the building. These countermeasures represented cutting-edge criminal technology for the era, reflecting both Dincio's experience and the team's professional approach to their craft. With the alarms neutralized, team members descended into the bank's main area, immediately focusing on the vault. Rather than attempting to breach the vault door, a formidable barrier designed specifically to resist forced entry, they applied their entry strategy to the ceiling of the vault. Using diamond-tipped drills and concrete cutting tools, they methodically created an opening in the vault ceiling, working slowly and precisely to minimize vibrations that might trigger any backup alarm systems. Once the vault ceiling was breached, the team members entered the secured space and began the process of opening safe deposit boxes. Using specialized drills and prying tools, they systematically defeated the locks on hundreds of boxes, examining the contents of each and selecting items of significant value that could be easily transported and later converted to cash. The operation continued throughout the weekend, with team members working in shifts to maintain both efficiency and security. Their methodical approach allowed them to thoroughly examine the contents of approximately 500 boxes over the course of several days. The value of the items taken during the burglary would later become a subject of considerable dispute. Initial estimates from bank officials and law enforcement suggested a haul valued between $8 million and $12 million in 1972 dollars, approximately $50 million to $75 million in current value. However, given the private nature of safe deposit box contents and the tendency of owners to underreport or not declare valuable items for insurance or tax purposes, some investigators believe the true value may have approached $30 million, nearly $190 million today. The stolen items reportedly included cash, jewelry, rare coins, stock certificates, and possibly uncut gemstones, though the exact inventory would never be fully established. By early Monday morning, March 27th, before the bank reopened, the team had completed their operation. They exited through the same roof opening they had created, carefully removing evidence of their presence and transporting their substantial haul back to their rented house. There, they began the process of dividing the proceeds according to their pre-established agreement, with each participant receiving a share proportionate to their role and contribution to the operation. Within days, most team members had departed California, returning to Ohio, or dispersing to other locations to avoid connection to the crime. When bank employees arrived on Monday morning, nothing initially appeared amiss. The exterior doors remained secure, windows were intact, and no alarm had been triggered during the weekend. It was only when the vault was opened for normal business operations that the breach was discovered. A gaping hole in the ceiling and hundreds of safe deposit boxes, forced open and emptied of their contents. The bank immediately contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which took jurisdiction due to the federally insured status of the institution. The FBI's initial assessment of the crime scene revealed the extraordinary sophistication of the burglary. The method of entry, the successful defeat of multiple alarm systems, and the precise approach to accessing the vault all indicated that this was the work of highly skilled professionals rather than opportunistic criminals. The absence of fingerprints, tool marks that could be traced to specific equipment, or other conventional forensic evidence further supported this conclusion, FBI officials privately acknowledged that they were dealing with one of the most technically accomplished bank burglaries they had ever encountered. Despite the technical sophistication of the crime, the investigation gained momentum through traditional investigative methods. A breakthrough came when investigators identified suspicious rental agreements for the house in Leisure World and a vehicle used by the burglars. These documents, combined with witness statements from neighbors who had observed unusual activity at the rental property, allowed the FBI to develop a preliminary list of suspects. Additional evidence emerged when agents discovered that some of the burglary team members had not displayed the same operational discipline in their personal activities as they had during the burglary itself, using credit cards, making long-distance phone calls, and engaging in other traceable activities during their time in California. The investigation gained further traction when informants in the Ohio criminal underworld began providing information about sudden displays of wealth by individuals connected to Emil Dincio. The circulation of rare coins and jewelry matching descriptions of items stolen from the United California Bank established additional connections between the suspects and the crime. By August 1972, approximately 5 months after the burglary, the FBI had gathered sufficient evidence to secure indictments against 7 individuals believed to be responsible for the crime. The subsequent arrests and prosecutions revealed the extensive criminal histories of the participants. Emil Dincio and several other team members had long records of similar crimes, specializing in bank burglaries rather than armed robberies. Court proceedings highlighted the technical expertise and planning that had gone into the United California Bank job, with prosecutors characterizing it as one of the most sophisticated bank crimes in American history. Most of the defendants were ultimately convicted and received substantial prison sentences, though the recovery of the stolen items proved far more challenging than the identification and prosecution of the perpetrators. Despite extensive efforts by the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, only a small fraction of the stolen items were ever recovered. Much had been quickly converted to cash, with proceeds laundered through various channels or integrated into legitimate businesses. Some items, particularly those with unique identifying characteristics that would make them difficult to sell, were allegedly destroyed or permanently hidden by the thieves to eliminate evidence connecting them to the crime. The vast majority of victims never recovered their property, with insurance covering only a portion of the declared losses. What made the United California Bank burglary particularly significant in criminal history was not merely its financial scale, but the technical accomplishment it represented. The burglars had defeated multiple security systems that banking professionals and security experts had considered virtually impenetrable. They had identified and exploited vulnerabilities that had not been previously recognized, forcing a reassessment of bank security standards nationwide. In the aftermath of the burglary, financial institutions across the country upgraded their security protocols, particularly focusing on vault ceiling reinforcement and more sophisticated alarm systems that would be more difficult to jam or bypass. For the FBI, the case represented both a challenge and an education. The technical sophistication of the crime required investigators to develop new forensic approaches and to consult with security experts from multiple fields to understand exactly how the burglars had defeated the bank's systems. The lessons learned during the investigation contributed to the evolution of the Bureau's approach to complex financial crimes and influence training programs for agents specializing in bank robbery investigations. The case became a standard component of FBI training materials, used to illustrate both criminal methodology and investigative techniques for complex burglary cases. The United California bank burglary also marked a transition point in the history of American bank crimes. It represented perhaps the apex of the traditional bank burglary, a crime dependent on physical skill, technical knowledge, and precise execution. In subsequent decades, bank crimes would increasingly shift toward armed robberies, which required less technical skill but involved higher risk of violence, or toward electronic methods that exploited vulnerabilities in digital systems rather than physical security measures. The Laguna Niguel burglary thus stands as one of the last and most accomplished examples of a criminal methodology that has largely disappeared from the contemporary landscape. For Emil Dincio, the architect of the operation, the United California bank job represented both his greatest achievement and his undoing. Despite his decades of experience and the technical perfection of the burglary itself, the operational security surrounding the crime had not matched its execution. The connections that led investigators from the crime scene to Dincio and his associates, rental agreements, witness observations, informant statements, and displays of sudden wealth highlighted the challenges of maintaining complete anonymity in an increasingly documented society, even in the pre-digital era of 1972. The burglary became legendary in both law enforcement and criminal circles, albeit for different reasons. For police and security professionals, it represented a case study in vulnerabilities and the need for comprehensive security planning that addressed all potential access points, not just the most obvious ones. For those in the criminal world, it exemplified the potential rewards of technical skill and planning, while its aftermath demonstrated the challenges of evading detection in the long term, regardless of the technical perfection of the crime itself. Decades later, the United California bank burglary remains one of the most studied bank crimes in American history. Books have been written about it, documentaries produced, and college courses in criminology and security studies continue to examine its details. What emerges from this ongoing analysis is an appreciation for the burglary as a technical achievement, however illegal, and recognition of the investigative persistence that eventually brought its perpetrators to justice despite the absence of conventional forensic evidence. For the residents of Laguna Niguel, the burglary created an unwanted association with criminal history for their otherwise peaceful community. The bank itself, following extensive security upgrades, continued operations for many years before eventually being absorbed through corporate mergers into larger financial institutions. The physical building at Monarch Bay Plaza has been repurposed multiple times in the intervening decades, with most current occupants and visitors unaware of the extraordinary events that transpired there in the spring of 1972. What ultimately distinguishes the United California bank burglary from many other famous heists is the combination of its technical sophistication, substantial financial scale, and the complete absence of violence or confrontation. Unlike robberies that rely on weapons, threats, or force, this crime was executed through intelligence, planning, and skill applied to defeating physical security systems rather than threatening human beings. This approach, burglary rather than robbery, reflects a different criminal methodology, and in some respects, a different criminal psychology, focused on solving technical problems rather than exercising power over others through fear or threat of harm. In the pantheon of famous heists, the United California bank burglary occupies a special place, a crime that, despite its illegality and the significant losses it caused to innocent victims, continues to fascinate for its demonstration of human ingenuity applied to overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles It reminds us that security systems are ultimately designed and implemented by human beings, and can therefore be analyzed and potentially defeated by other human beings with sufficient determination, knowledge, and skill. This lesson, learned at substantial cost by a California bank in 1972, continues to inform our understanding of security challenges in the modern era